I'd like to call the Thursday, July 17th, 2025 meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. The first order of business is to approve minutes. Joy, are we prepared to make a motion on approving minutes? Or what are your thoughts?
Yes, prepared to make a motion to approve the minutes of June 11th, June 25th, and July 2nd.
June 11th, June 25th, and July 2nd?
Yes.
Anyone have any comments or issues with any of those minutes? No. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thanks, Joy. And thanks, Jessica.
Yes.
She's a good one. Do we have any reason to modify the agenda? Okay. The first order of business is old business. We made a presentation, I can't remember what the date was it July 8th? Yeah, it's right there. This Charter Revision Commission, I made a presentation at the Selectboard meeting on July 8th. We, obviously, everybody saw the memo that we submitted, and we are going to be going back in the beginning of September to give them what we hope is this nice document. So that was, and anybody else who was there can sort of talk more about that. But that was our presentation. Was pretty much, here's what we're doing, here's what we're gonna do, here's what our plan is, we're working, we're gonna get this thing done. We did find out that.
Excuse me, point of order. Could you speak up, please?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
If I'm not screaming loud enough, just please do that again. So we gave our update on where we are. There is a petition being circulated to put Australian ballot to a townwide vote. That would make it, it's one of the provisions what you can do to get the charter change. So that is happening. That doesn't have anything to do with what we're here to do. So basically that was, in a nutshell, the very Reader's Digest version. So I don't know if anybody else has any more comments on that. Great. Second item under old business is to discuss how the Human Services Review Committee and the Finance Committee are selected. Just for people who weren't at the last meeting, we discussed this. We had the Finance Committee members were here, we discussed it with them. They gave us their recommendation how they'd like to be selected, which is putting it on the ballot for townwide vote selection. We had David Miner, who from the Human Services Committee was there, but the Human Services Committee hadn't met yet, so we had no real official conversation with him. So we have David here tonight, and what we're hoping to do, knock on wood, is get ourselves where we can make a decision on how these two committees will be selected, because they are currently elected on the floor of representative town meeting. That's why we're having this discussion. So I think we'll start off with Human Services. And I don't know if we want to hear from David, if you want to, I know you folks had a meeting, and I know when you left us last, I think the question around the Finance Committee, it was putting all of their names on the ballot. And we didn't, that's sort of where we left you, is what ideas does the committee have?
So you want me to?
Yeah, why don't you come on up? And I would ask if people speak, just say who you are so we know and Jessica knows and the public knows.
I'm David Miner, I'm chair of the Human Services Review Committee, and an RTM member from District 7. Yes, Kate, we did meet a couple nights ago, and we were able to discuss a number of the items that were brought up by the Finance Committee. One of which was the election by Australian ballot of the members. As a committee, we agree that that would be a prudent way to go. The question might be as to when that would occur and the timing and such. I believe that the Finance Committee recommended that anybody could just submit their name to be on the ballot. We, on the other hand, feel as though that it would be proper if somebody had to submit a petition with perhaps 10 signatures. In essence, falling in line with what we believe the rest, other positions in town require. So we weren't looking to have something special, happen here. We talked also about terms. I think the Finance Committee was talking about one-year terms. I think it was one thing that we've seen that Human Services is a committee that's long-standing, that has had provides an important function for the town, and that having institutional memory is extremely important. So our thought was to have member terms, 2 or 3 years. Potentially, say if we went 3 years, we could then rotate, ease into it over time. But we were not comfortable with a one-year scenario. Membership, the RTM approved year before last, I believe, a cap of 11 members. And to have more than that, I think it's very difficult to manage. 9 might be okay, but I would not want to do any more, certainly any more than 11. I think having a range, which I think we also talked about, I think Finance Committee was recommending 6 to 8. I don't think we need a range. I think we just need the cap, and then if we need to fill in over the course of time, then as allowed now by the moderator, we could go to the moderator to have either a replacement or a position filled. I think one concern regarding, and this is more of a general point about the town committee, the town meeting. The concern was expressed about the ability for individuals who may not be able to attend the town meeting for X number of hours. And if they're following in the line, footsteps of RTM, we're expecting it to be 6, 7, 8 hours. And so the question is, if it's something held during the week, if it's something held during a weekday, if it's something held, so whether or not individuals who have to work during the day, or with children, or have disabilities, their ability to get there. One of the ideas of RTM is actually have representatives for them.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Mm-hmm.
Are you still talking about, I just don't mean to interrupt you, but are you talking about the Human Services Committee?
And this is an opinion of the Human Services Committee that was offered.
Oh, but it's not of being on the Human Services
No.
Committee?
Nope.
This is about RTM or?
Right, this is
okay.
something that came up in our discussion.
Okay.
It's kind of an extension of, as we were talking about membership.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and
Because you don't have to, as a Human Services Committee member, you don't have to go to the representative town meeting.
Nope.
Okay, I was just getting
Nope.
confused, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So it's just kind of a side road that we went down, and we did talk about it for a while. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to voice that.
Okay. And I'm sorry I interrupted David, I just didn't want to
Oh, no.
miss the
Absolutely.
where I was supposed to
No
go.
problem. So
Can I ask a question about the
Sure, Maya.
staggered terms?
Mm-hmm.
What were you envisioning? So many for 3 years, so many for 2
Yeah,
years?
so if we had, 11, we could start out with, a group that had, the first election might have a group that has 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years, and then just kind of roll into it. I mean, RTM today, everybody's elected for 3 years, right? And if we see in the ballot a 1 year or a 2 year, it's because someone resigned. And so, what they're doing is plugging in somebody else to replace them. So I think, having that type of rolling membership, I think would be valuable and helpful. No, I'm only speaking for human services.
Yeah.
I think, just because I think you asked a question, David, about when people would be elected.
Mm-hmm.
I think the intent, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to have people elected on the March 4th,
Mm-hmm.
the first.
Town meeting day.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when people would be elected.
Mhm.
I know that's what Hillary prefers. I think, and I don't know if David said this at the meeting, David Levenbach, I think they were thinking, it could be a special day where people get elected. For the town clerk, it's not ideal.
Mhm.
So I think,
Would town meeting then be held the quote unquote town meeting be held that same day?
on the Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
no, we've been talking about having it on Saturday.
Okay,
Yeah,
as a possibility.
One point on that.
oh yeah,
Under the timeline that we're operating under now, that first town meeting in 2026 would likely occur on the Tuesday, but for purposes of what we're proposing for the charter moving forward after that point, I just want to make that clear. There's a likelihood that we're going to be operating under state statute 2026.
Yeah.
Because the charter changes won't be approved yet.
Mm-hmm.
but that would just be for the first thing before charter changes are approved. If the town votes to rescind town meeting, I'm sorry, our town meeting, town votes to rescind representative town meeting, as Hannah says, we revert to what state statute says, which means open town meeting on that Tuesday.
Mhm.
But it's our intent at this point, when we talked about it, not to have the actual physical town meeting where you sit in a room together until a Saturday.
Okay.
And we don't know which Saturday yet because we don't have to do it
Mm-hmm.
on the last Saturday.
So I think Hannah also mentioned kind of an adjustment as we roll into the first year, and as I get into what I have to present, I think we'll have a discussion about the transition from an RTM format into a town meeting format, because that will change, obviously, the way that not so much the way we're going to function, but the timing and kind of the calendar presentation. So we will get to that. The other thing was about putting bios up. I think we didn't have any problem with bios, but again, I think the point was made not to do anything special for finance or human services, and that if in fact it's something that you expect or provide for those committees, should be provided for other committees as well.
And I think our determination on that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're not gonna put anything like that in the charter that requires anybody to do that, because we can't force anyone to
Right.
do that. And
Okay.
we can't tell the town that they have to put stuff on their website.
Okay.
But it'd be nice if everybody did it, somebody else outside of all of us.
Yeah, on
Otherwise-
Facebook or
Yeah.
front porch or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that is a discussion about membership. We also then the finance committee talked about a percentage versus a dollar amount.
Mhm.
And we talked about that for a bit. And it ended up that as a committee, we didn't come up with any decision one way or the other. I think, you know, we talked about the way that we operate now and the timing of everything makes dealing with percentages difficult from a financial budgeting scenario. And I can understand that, because when you're talking about 2%, you don't know what that 2% is until the budget is actually created. So I think as we talk about the transition, if in fact we work with a number, if we change our timing calendar to align with a starting line of town meeting, everyone will know what that percentage is, what that dollar amount is. And so if we stay with the percent, that will work, and if we come up with the dollar amount, that would work also. And it would end up actually to be, in essence, the same. The question of what the dollar amount from a budgetary standpoint would actually go away. I guess the only thing that would happen would be, this past year, the budget was defeated and not finally approved until June. And if that would be the case, I would imagine that whatever was decided from a human services standpoint wouldn't take place until the final budget was approved, whether or not that's a percentage or a solid, solid dollar amount. One thing that we were talking also about at the last meeting was kind of the timeline and the way it was going to work. And as opposed to, we were talking about the way it works now. RTM meets in March, approves what was presented by Human Services for this budget, and also then approves an allocation for the next budget. Human Services then has completed its task and chore for the current budget, and we don't then pick up and begin the process on the new allocation until roughly September. And then we work through September through December, receiving all the applications, looking at all the applications. We know the dollar amount that we're playing with and working with, and we complete our task in time for publication by the town and the town meeting. So the RTM process is going to go away. So Peter and I kind of explored a little bit more because we were chasing our tails a bit at the end of the last meeting. And came up with a way, I think, that would work from a human services standpoint, in that at town meeting, a dollar amount is assigned, whether it's a percentage or a whole number. And once approved, then the Human Services Committee would then begin to meet. Let's say it's approved middle of March, we begin to meet, then end of March, beginning of April. And we look to have everything completed by early July, end of July, maybe August at the latest. And at that point in time, the allocation would be ready, and we would have processed everything, and we'd be able to disperse the money.
I think there's an issue with that.
Well,
Because-
okay.
I think there's more to the story.
Yeah, there's more to the story. Absolutely, there's an issue. So, before Peter wants, I think he's dug deeper than I, but it's part of the process. So what I did was I presented this to the committee, and initially the thought was, someone said, if that's the one, I'm not going to do it. And then I explained that the timeline is exactly the same. Nothing changes. All we've done is we moved it up. And so, as we talked about it, everybody was in agreement with the change. Now, the one big thing is, this year, we are beginning in September with the allocation of 2%, which was approved by RTM. And so that time process that I talked about will be done by, in a percentage, in March. That, though, is for the disbursement for next July. So we would have already completed the task that would normally have been assigned by the new town meeting scenario. So in essence, the committee that's formed, and now I'm just talking off the top of my head, sits and has nothing to do unless something comes up for it to pay attention to until the following year, because we've already done all the work on what was being presented. So that kind of completes a little bit of a crazy scenario. And Peter,
I'm still confused, because I don't see how anything changes. You, let's say you get elected by ballot on the first Tuesday in March.
Mhm.
And we have open town meeting on the next Saturday,
Mhm.
at which point the budget is approved, just like it would have been on the third Saturday by RTM. So you would know on that first Saturday what your dollar amount would be. And then,
Now, am I asking, what fiscal year are you thinking here?
These are happening in the same fiscal year now, is what,
It would.
yes,
Yes.
yeah,
yes. Yeah, so yours, mine's thinking what we're thinking, the same fiscal year.
Can I shed a little bit more light?
so you're saying that then you would have to do the allocation before July.
Well, so I guess my understanding is that what we would do is that the money would be allocated to be spent in the current, it would be dispersed in the following July.
The following July, right?
Well, no, following July, being 4 months later,
Yeah. Let's say this is.
and not waiting around.
The only problem with that is, it's my understanding that somebody has to vote to approve your allocation.
You're absolutely correct.
Yes, you're correct, and there's a solution to
What we'd like
that,
to add.
and there's a solution to that.
So a couple of things. Let me answer that so that
Yeah.
the concern that arose last time around there's a statutory requirement that the authority to issue the checks can't be delegated to the committee. So the way we're suggesting that be addressed is that when the committee is finished with its work, so around July or August of each year, that they would bring the allocation that the committee's arrived at to the select board for the select board to ratify. The select board would need to review what the committee has brought forward and authorize that the checks be issued in accordance with the allocation that the committee had determined. In that way, we're assuming, I haven't discussed it with Hannah, that the select board would be directing the expenditure of the funds. They would be doing it in accordance with the work product of the committee.
Yeah, Bob's online, he can speak to that more, but I have been thinking about this too, and I have a similar proposal, which is based on the model that Essex uses, where they have townwide vote on the human services allocation, because what is required is that it's voted on separate from the budget. What they do is they vote on the amount and it goes into what's called their human services fund. And there's a committee that is appointed by the select board, and it's sort of a similar timeline to how our human services committee operates now. They have sort of an open application window that runs in, I want to say like September and October, and then they review all of the applications and they go back to the select board and provide their recommendations, and the select board approves those allocations, so it would be similar. But in that scenario, they wouldn't have to be elected. And I know that that's something that Human Services has expressed preference to be elected. I'm just presenting an option that works in another town, and I looked into it further, and none of that is actually in their charter. It's just a committee that the select board creates, which is their authority to do, and they actually have a policy document that says that they allocate 1% of their budget every year. So they kind of go in knowing roughly what it's gonna be. It's not like it's a moving target. And in their scenario, I don't know if we need to necessarily go this far, their select board actually comes up with a set of priorities of organizations that they want to support, or types of services that they want to provide funding for, but the committee operates separately and presents their recommendations without there's no one on the select board involved in that selection process, but they get to sort of express, here's what we think the goal should be for this funding year. And so I think that would simplify the process considerably with this whole two-step, here's what we're approving for this past year, here's what we're guessing we're gonna approve for next year, and it really sort of, it doesn't change the timing of their work at all, just changes the manner in which it's done.
I think it would change the timing, or it ought to change the timing, or else there would be a long unnecessary delay.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's
Before
the money could get allocated earlier,
Yeah,
but in terms of when they're reviewing applications and everything, that could all happen at on the same timeline that they're operating on now.
basically a 4-month period. So I think my sense is, unless I've misunderstood something, that what you just described is essentially the same. There are important differences in terms of how the members become members is a fundamental question that we need to answer. But everything else that you just described, having a separate vote from the budget so that the voters decide the amount each year, but decide it on the same day as the budget's being approved, so it's only one decision each year. It's not a this year and a next year thing that has led to a lot of confusion.
Right.
And then the committee can get to work right away, and then in the middle of the summer, there's a work product from that, and the checks can be cut. So, and that comes back to the select board in either scenario.
Right, and I think the benefit of having them appointed by the select board is that you don't have to wait till the next election to fill a vacancy, or that. Those can just sort of be backfilled as needed, and I think that would. It seems like it would be more of a working relationship, sort of, with the select board, not maybe necessarily fully under their oversight, and but it creates this sort of.
I'm sorry, I like the fact, I like them to be elected. Because I'd like, I don't have any trouble with the select board approving the final allocation, but I'd like to see the Human Services Committee either be elected, because it ensures some kind of independence, and I think that's important. David wants to say.
So Hannah, you mentioned that you would have to go and have an election for an open position. I think it's built into this that the moderator would be able, to approve an open fill an open position, which is what exists today.
Yes.
I feel like we've heard a lot about these sort of elections where there's non-competitive seats, and I don't know that there's a ton of people raring to be on the Human Services Committee.
Yeah.
This year.
There was this year.
This year, but I don't know if that's always been the case.
Go ahead, Fish.
And I also worry that by starting to say, oh yeah, this committee can get elected, that committee can get elected, we're going to sort of open the door where every committee is going to want to be elected instead of appointed.
Oh yeah, let's hear from Bob.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you
Yep.
can.
Just a couple things. On the debate as to whether committee members should be elected or appointed, that's a good debate, and I'm not going to weigh in so much because either way is legal on that. It's really a matter of whether, however the charter comes out, it's going to be upheld either way on that. From the standpoint, though, of a vacancy, right now, if they would be elected, if you go away from representative town meeting, so it's an open town meeting scenario, under Title 24, vacancies would be filled by appointment of the select board until an election is had. So the process that we've had in the past of having the moderator fill vacancies would not necessarily be the statutory process that would be followed. So from a legal procedural standpoint, if you're going to give that power to the moderator by virtue of the charter, that would be a divergence from state law, state statute on that. It doesn't mean it can't be done because the charter is in itself a piece of state legislation. So that was one thing I just wanted to weigh in from the legal standpoint. And on the committees, well, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. As far as the appointment by select board or election, that's a debate to be had. But the question is, are you really talking about the elections only for the finance and for human services, or are you going to, make that bigger into further committees? The finance committee, at least there are provisions in state statute allowing for the election of a budgetary advisory committee. There is not that same election ability, so to speak, in Title 17 for your average committees, whether you're talking human services or a conservation committee or things like that. So I will stop at that point. Thank you.
And I think the difference, in my mind, between the Human Services Committee and the Finance Committee over here and the tree
TOB.
advisory and all this other stuff, the Human Services and Finance Committees were set up how many decades ago to be part of representative town meeting. That was the purpose. You know what I mean? They're not the traditional town committee that people applied for through the town manager's office. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the difference between these two committees.
Can I just
Yeah.
ask Bob to just confirm also that you can't just give an amount of money to human services and it has to come back to the select board and voters, right?
That is correct. You can't have, by statute, and thank you, the big important thing here is that the electorate needs to vote on the amount of money, the big pool of money that's going to human services. That's what the statute requires. How you then go about delegating that to a committee to vet various organizations and review their applications and make recommendations, those recommendations need to come back to the select board because the select board holds the purse strings for the distribution of funds that are approved by town meeting, whether that town meeting is representative town meeting or open town meeting or Australian ballot. Town meeting comes up with the amount, the select board distributes that amount. So it's unlawful for the select board simply to delegate without it having come back to the select board to a committee. So to give you an example, you can have money set aside for a trails committee, but the trail committee can't go spend the money. Only the select board can spend the money. Same goes for human services.
So the process that we've sort of outlined on a global level, which would be to have the Human Services Committee elected in March, the first Tuesday in March. However many Saturdays later, anybody who wants to come to a big room gets in the room. We decide how much we want to spend for human services, that group. Then after that meeting, the Human Services Committee takes that dollar amount, takes applications, has their wonderful process that they have. Then in how many months, whenever, there's a set time, that allocation with all of the information goes to the select board, and the select board says, hopefully yes. I mean, then in a global sense, that's what we have to do. I mean, that works.
That's correct, yeah.
And there's one, if I might just add, there's one additional thing on the front end that I think is important. It's not, I don't think it needs clarification and legal advice, but I think it's important in terms of the broader conversation that we've had over the last several months around, you know, who does what on certain of these important things that we do each year. And one of the ways in which this process would be streamlined and not have the process that has been frustrating and confusing for a lot of people to have on one warning, an action for this year and a prediction or a allocation amount for next year. Eliminating that, having it just be action on this year's number, which then would lead to the follow-up activity that we described right away. It has to start somewhere, and the place that it would start is with the select board. One of the things that was discussed in prior months was that, you know, the select board does everything else in terms of bringing forward a proposed budget. It's subject to the action at town meeting, but the select board does the work to bring it forward. And so in this process, it would actually begin with, well, it would be a separate vote at town meeting on the overall budget and a separate vote on this particular piece. In the first instance, the consideration of how much to allocate to human services within the context of the budget that's proposed for this year would come from the select board, and then would be dealt with at town meeting.
Just one sec.
I just want to clarify, Bob, you said, because there's a statute that says you can appoint advisory budget committee, and we can talk about that when we get to the proposed edits, but if there's no statutory mechanism to appoint other officers, can we still do it in the charter?
Say that again, if there's no statutory ability
To elect
in
a human services committee, can we put that in the charter? Like, can we?
Yes, because if the legislature approves it, it is a state statute. Now, the wisdom of how many things of committees you want to have elected is a matter of debate. Statutorily, right now, finance budgetary committees are listed in the Title 17 elected officials. So the legislature has already approved that. But if a charter, if approved, is a legislative enactment, so legally, yes, it could be. I think it's just one of those questions of a slippery slope. And Kate, you talk about, you know, these two committees being the big committees. That may be the case now and has been the case for, let's say, 10 years, but it may not be the big case 10 years from now. So, but of course, you can amend your charter as you see fit in the future.
And so for the 2026 year, we couldn't just put that on the ballot if there's no charter approved yet.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The 2026 annual meeting is going to have to be sort of a transitional year, depending on the vote on whether to rescind RTM.
I think Liz was first.
Thank you, Kate. Liz McLaughlin, Chair of the Brattleboro Selectboard. It was interesting listening to the first part of this discussion because it wasn't until the very end, I think, that anyone acknowledged that we do have a select board form of government. all of the machinations that you were talking about were absent the select board. And I would like a human service committee that works with the select board in the budget process, and very much like what Hannah described as being appointed by the select board to do their work in conjunction with the budget and then have it voted on by the public. And that seems super logical to me, and it also saves your committee, which was appointed by the select board, a ton of work, because you could just be silent and the select board would appoint a human service committee just like any other committee, and we can set ethics rules, and we can work with the human service committee to discuss what would be an appropriate amount, an amount that the town can afford, and it just seems simpler and more logical to break from the RTM tradition, because that's what you propose to do, rescind RTM, and then these two committees become a committee like any other committee. And the whole idea is to work with the select board, not in opposition to the select board. And I just feel there's a lot of resistance to working with the select board, and this very body was appointed by the select board. We have a select board form of government, and I think it should be respected. Thank you.
Randy?
Hi, Randy Blodgett, District 7. Question is procedural that Hannah brought up. So Essex, is there oversight other than, like, can you get into the details of how Essex does it? Is there oversight? Is there anything by their select board or how their statute's written? Just, I don't know what might come up, but if there's things that would come up, just since it's taxpayers' money, that somebody beyond the committee, whether they're appointed, elected, however that would happen, that would have some oversight in that.
Select board would approve the money.
But do they have a veto power? Do they have any editing power? Is there any ability to do anything if they saw something improper? And I'm just trying to, since this is all new, I'm looking for all the details, like Bob said, 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road. Like that, since we're electing the select board to be holders of the purse, that do they have that right? And then the other question would be, would this committee's meetings all be open under this new system? Because my understanding is currently they aren't all open.
They're
Well,
open.
and I'm asking that because I went to the meeting the other night and I didn't think even to ask that, but since then somebody said that once one part starts, then they're not open. So I don't know. I'm asking. Just
Let's answer the first question first.
I didn't look specifically into the oversight. You can look at their website. It's very well done. It has a lot of resources. There are copies of the applications. There are copies of the score sheets. There are the results of the scoring. All of that is on their website. And like I said, none of this is actually in their charter because it's a select board appointed committee and it doesn't need to be.
There's nothing making the select board that's going to say the select board has to vote yes on this.
No,
Do you know what I mean?
I'm just asking, like, because it seemed that way. Like there wasn't part, like it's like the select board could vote no. That I guess I'm just looking, since we're making changes, like Peter said, procedurally, what are we and David? That's what I'm just curious
I
with.
can tell you from my perspective, I don't support something in the charter that says the select board must vote on what this committee comes forward with.
That's functionally no different than just giving.
I guess I'm
Do you
just
know what
trying to
I mean?
understand that.
I mean,
Like,
I'm thinking to me, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because then people can say, okay, you got it wrong. My vision of this whole thing is that, as Peter says, it all starts in October when the select board sits down and they're dealing with their budget and they say, here's how much the town budget is, here's how much we think that the human services allocation should be. Stop me if I get this wrong. What the human services allocation should be. on that first Tuesday in March, the Human Services Committee is elected. Then in whatever Saturday it is in March, we all gather where we're gonna gather. We vote on the budget. We take that amount that the select board has said, we suggest X amount on human services. And just like we can on the budget, the voters of Brattleboro who show up, they say, oh no, we want the allocation to be higher for human services, or we want it to be lower. We settle on a number as a group, we all vote for it, hand the number to the Human Services Committee. The Human Services Committee does its magic, like it's been doing now, and then that proposal goes to the select board, and the select board can say, yeah, we want it, or no, we don't. I don't see how we can say the select board has to do what that committee says.
That was
That's
my
what
only
I'm
question,
saying.
I'm asking.
Yeah, well,
and
I'm
then-
going through it, Mike.
Yeah, and then the other part that I asked was just a couple people, because I'm trying to go to all the committee meetings, different committees, so that when somebody asks me something, I have my own personal knowledge. And somebody said, oh, you can't go after, and if I would have known, I would have asked David directly the other night. But so anyway, that was, and Essex model would be awesome if you guys would do that, so it's transparent. If
Bob
that's,
has hand raised, I think he can speak to that too, about the open meetings, but David can speak to it if you want.
I mean, David, are your meetings warned?
Yes, yes. And the only time when we would go behind closed doors is when we are discussing individual applications and making a final decision. So we kind of go into kind of administrative, view, and that's just one meeting. Otherwise, all of our discussions are open, and final results are published, so that you can see what's going on.
So you kind of go into deliberative session.
Yes, a deliberative session. Yeah.
Bob may say I'm wrong.
Sorry, the screen froze there for like the last 5 seconds, but I agree with David in that their meetings are open, and if they wish to go into deliberative session, which they do when they're getting down to making decisions, that is perfectly doable for that committee, and that's a closed session. But that it's still an open meeting at which they go into deliberative session, very similar to like how a development review board goes in to make a decision. So that handles the procedural part. Getting back to the question about the select board approving it and the Essex model, it does come back to the select board because anytime, so the voters raise the large sum of money, or I shouldn't say large, but a sum of money for human services. The select board in Essex appoints that committee, and whether or not you appoint or have this committee elected remains to be seen. But the committee then is charged with going and doing the work, which is advisory to the select board. If they come back to the select board and the select board does not agree for some reason, the select board can change it or essentially veto it. I doubt that a select board would veto the whole thing, but if they were to change their minds with regard to a certain organization, they could do that. And then the check and balance is, well, don't elect those select board member, the next year. But that's your check and balance on that.
Right. And they couldn't change, the select board couldn't say, no, we're not gonna spend all of this money. They'd still be obligated to spend that money, but they could say, no, I don't wanna give it to X group.
That's right. Let's say the committee came back and gave it 90% to one organization and split the other 10% among, 20 others. The select board might say, well, we don't think our committee did a good job there. We're going to reallocate that. That theoretically and legally would be possible, but then that's going to play out in the ballot box the next year.
Right. And you'd hope that after the extensive work,
Right.
that would happen.
I think that there's actually something there for us to explore further, both in terms of what we think would be the best system and then the potential legal implications of where we land and whether that's an appropriate place to land. Because the ballot box is the key. So if if we decided to have these positions elected by the people rather than appointed by the select board, then there is accountability to the people at the ballot box for these positions. And so I think this question of advisory to the select board versus semi-independent in the work, which would lead to a conversation we'd have to have about what is the proper process when the work product comes out of that committee. But if the committee itself is accountable to the people, then the scenario you described, Bob, where it needs to be dealt with by the select board because they're accountable at the ballot box, I think is not the same as if the select board is appointing the committee and the committee is explicitly advisory to the board. So I think there's a thing to wrestle with there.
Well, I think there's another component, which is that the select board has the power of the purse, so to speak. And I don't think that can be allocated even if those positions are elected, but Bob can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That's correct. I mean, even if those positions are elected, the committee does not have the power of the purse.
Right.
And as Liz pointed out, we have a select board form of government.
Yep.
And I realize this is all part of the debate of how you want to run a government. But the select board, at least in every town in Vermont right now, plays a central role, especially with the powers of the purse.
And I think under this scenario that we're kind of batting around, the people get to elect the Human Services Committee members. The people get to decide how much, the select board starts it by saying, here's how much money we think should be spent. Then the people at town meeting get to say, yeah, we think that we agree with that amount, or we think it should go up or down. Then the people that are elected by the people get to sit there and say, we're gonna figure out who this money should go to. And then it goes back to the select board to say, yes, we agree or maybe we don't. So I think it's like the perfect balance of it. And we're doing it in the time frame that the budget is being done, so it's not this confusing, we're allocating money for a year ahead that we have no idea what our finances are gonna look like. So there's so many pieces to it that I think work, but yeah, I'm only one person sitting up here.
Ultimately, I think the only thing we really need to decide about what goes in the charter is whether or not this is an elected committee.
But if we decide that we think it should be an elected committee, there are other things that we may need
We
to
would
say
have
about
to
it.
put into charter.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Right. Correct.
Fritz Bright, District 9 rep. I feel like boundaries are being crossed right, left, and center here. We have some checks and balances which I feel are being ignored in this conversation. We do have a select board. We also have a representative town meeting. We will continue to have a representative town meeting unless that's legally changed. So we need to treat it as though that's what we have. The Human Services Committee and the Finance Committee are products of RTM, which serve at the will of RTM to advise RTM. They are not select board appointed committees. And to try and you guys keep talking about what you're deciding. You guys serve as in an advisory role for this. You do not decide this. Last I knew, when I went through this process last time, we at RTM were the ones who decided what the charter changes were, and we did a lot of work on it over the course of that process after the committee brought what their recommendations were. So let's be really clear that you guys are playing an advisory role. I feel like it's being done in a kind of a heavy-handed way, which I don't really appreciate. So this is an RTM committee. It's not the business of the select board. The select board serves a advisory role. Both Human Services and the Select Board put a whole lot of work into putting together their budgets. It's very important work. It's critical to the work of RTM to be able to do their job. And we appreciate that greatly. We appreciate the work. We value their input and all the homework they do to get there. It makes our job a lot easier, but it is still our job to vote on the budget and to fine tune it, whether it's fine tuning the Human Services budget or fine tuning the town budget in detail. And we have thus far had a good working relationship with the Select Board and have, I think, overall been really appreciative of the work since we instituted the Human Services Committee, which I remember the days before that, and it was a shit show, excuse my French. It was horrible. It was ridiculous. It was a popularity contest. Thank God we're not doing that anymore. But let's keep some of these boundaries clear, for God's sake.
Can I just say one thing? Normally, at the beginning of every meeting, I do the giant disclaimer about what our job is. We know very well that all we're doing is making recommendations.
So
So-
if you would refer to it as recommendations, I would
Okay,
appreciate
and
that, rather than decisions.
Well, we've just been doing this for so long, and I forget that I have to keep making the set the stage. So every meeting from now on, I'm gonna set the stage, because we make it really clear that we know that the voters of this town are gonna be the ones that decide what we are recommending. I also just wanna make it clear, we're referring to open town meeting, because that is what our recommendation is gonna be. So all of our discussions, we're not saying RTM, because our recommendation is gonna be open town meeting. But again, it's only a recommendation if everybody higher up the food chain, which is the people that our neighbors are. So I just wanna put
So
that.
don't assume that that is what's gonna get.
I know, but
through
we
the
have
next
to,
vote.
we aren't assuming, but we have to
Okay.
sort of go into this meeting talking, I mean, we can every 5 seconds
But
go.
whether it's open town meeting or representative town meeting, the Human Services Committee still is part of town meeting. It's
No,
not-
I think you're
it's not a
hearing,
select board
I think you're
appointment.
hearing some of us very strongly support you in that.
Okay, good.
I don't
Thank
think,
you.
I don't think you're hearing other, we haven't made the decision yet, but let's just make Hannah, then I'll have.
When we are referring to decisions, we're referring to what we are deciding to recommend.
Yes.
So I don't think it's inappropriate at all for us to use that term.
Yeah.
And we are looking at this proactively with the other decisions that we've already made about what we're going to recommend and how Human Services would fit into that recommendation.
Right, Andy.
Andy Davis, District 9. This is a very clarifying conversation. I want to thank Liz for bringing up that the Select Board is really the legislature in Brattleboro under state law. And I think a lot of the debate about the role of RTM is not fully understood by some members of the public who, because it looks like a legislature and it has the word representative in it, and it has districts, that they think that RTM has this vast numbers of powers as a legislature. The Select Board is our legislature. My recollection, and that's where the accountability comes in and where the role of Australian ballot comes in, that our Select Board can be voted out, as it just was. Every incumbent on the ballot was voted out by secret ballot in the ballot box. So I want to get back to the Human Services, because that's the topic here. My recollection from history is that moving forward from when we created the Human Services Committee, which was a brilliant thing to do, but sometime in COVID, around the COVID time, there became this thing about RTM raising or lowering or debating the amount of money, which I don't believe had happened before around 2019. That amount of money was in the budget, and we simply appointed the Human Services Committee to have a rational way of dividing the pie. And all of a sudden, I'm having this light bulb go off that just as if we said we'd like to put $20,000 back in the budget to paint the fire truck, and everybody says, yeah, we want a bright red fire truck, and then the Select Board says, I don't think we're going to do it this year, things are too tight. I think that's really, according to what Bob Fisher was saying, We've been deluding ourselves that we have all this power about raising and lowering the human services budget. Because by what Bob Fisher was just saying, that we would say we want another $30,000 in the human services budget, it's another recommendation, no different by law, because we don't have the power of the purse. When I say we, RTM, I'm a member of RTM. We can make a recommendation to spend more money, but when at the end of the day, it comes back to the select board. So I'll just end by saying, and I really do, I'd love it if I'm wrong, that the town attorney would just put me back in my place. But that's what I thought Bob Fisher was just saying, that we can make a recommendation to raise and lower the big number, but at the end of the day, the select board spends the money and the voters decide whether this select board is guiding the town in the right way. And I think some of the public criticism of RTM right now is based on a lack of understanding of how town government works, because the RTM does not really have the power to add tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the budget and make that money get spent, whether it's in human services or equipment. We are there as an advisory body, I'm going to quote the charter, a source of new ideas and to approve and review the work of the select board. We're not there to build the budget, we're not there to spend the money, and that's all I have to say. And if Attorney Fisher finds me grossly wrong, I would appreciate being put back in my place.
Andy, we do set the budget.
No, it's brought to us, and we approve it or change it.
Can we let Bob
But we
speak?
can't make them.
We're gonna have Bob, Bob is here to either put you in your place or tell you you're right.
They do.
Right. I'm not putting you in your place. I just want, when you look at it historically, the reason we went to having a human services committee was essentially to save time at town meeting, because before that you had individual articles by every single human service agency that whether they petitioned to be on the town meeting warning or were put there by motion of the select board, you had so many town meeting articles on human services, and for each one you had somebody get up to introduce it. You had the executive director of whatever organization it is. You had people that said, oh, this is my favorite organization. And then you had people that got up and said, I really don't think you should put that amount of money toward that organization. And all of that for each and every one took a long, long time. So we went to having the committee that helped give the recommendation as to how that money is to be split up. But for years, that's the select board that came with an amount that it proposed, and then the committee gave its recommendation to divide it all out. So I just wanted to give, I'm not saying by any means Andy's incorrect. It's just I'm trying to give the history of how we got there.
Now, can I just ask one question while you're still here, Bob? And I think Hannah might have been the one that says this, that by state statute, the town, like the electorate, has to separately approve the human services funding?
Right. What the state statute says is that a town may raise and appropriate or raise a sum of money for funding human service organizations within the town. Mm-hmm. It's a very short statute. I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing. But that's what the statute says for purposes of funding human services organizations. So that's the statute says there's a vote on the money going towards human services. The way I think that the Essex model does it is you come up with that figure, and then you have your committee allocate. It comes back to the select board for approval and distribution. That's all done for the same fiscal year that you're talking about. The way it's done under RTM is a little bit different because it's seemingly spanning 2 fiscal years, but that's getting away from the actual constitutional issue of it.
Can I just ask?
Bob, just to be clear, that statute also, which I can't find right now,
also says it has to be voted on separate from the overall town budget, right?
Let me
That was my question.
just find that. I think it's funny.
That's what
Or like-
that's the heart of what I'm trying
That's
to
right.
get at, because I
Yeah.
don't think it does.
Right, that's the question.
Yeah, give me 1 second and I'll find that.
If we put money in for something, they don't have to spend it on that.
He's flipping his.
Once they double check the law, I think we're missing something.
What I'm trying to get at, is one simple question, is if the town meeting decides to raise, by 1% the human services budget, I personally, unless I'm corrected here, believe that the select board could say, it's a rough year, that was a nice suggestion, you raised the big number, but we're not gonna raise that any more than we would do for public service budget or police budget. The town can recommend spending more money and raising the big number, but the select board decides what to spend and how to spend it.
Yeah, when we,
That's what I'd like Bob to
when we
clarify.
it's my understanding that when we currently amend, at RTM, currently vote to amend the budget, it's advisory only.
Yeah.
That's what
But,
Well,
but that's
no.
not the case with human services. Can I
Yeah.
just clarify, please? So there's two different things I wanted to say. One, just sort of put it in the room so that we all can continue to wrestle with it as we move forward with the discussion. I just urge us to be careful about saying the statute says X and therefore that's the word, because the whole reason that there's a charter in any community is to determine the precise ways in which we're going to set up systems that we think are appropriate for our community that aren't the standard ones that are just in the charter, that are just in the statutes. If we were just following statutes all the time, we wouldn't have a charter at all, and we wouldn't need one. And there are communities that function that way. They just operate under the.
And whatever we pass becomes.
It
part
becomes
of
laws.
state
Bob has
statute,
said a couple
yeah.
of times tonight. So for the recommendations of this committee and the actions of the voters of the town, if we think something should be a certain way, we should write it down and vote on it that way and send it up to the legislature and not be restricted by what the statute says is the standard way of doing it in Vermont. Because that's like what the whole exercise is about. So I think that's a fundamentally important part of all the work that we're doing. Specific to this question, I think it's really important when we're talking about how it has been done. And it's not to say that it has to be, that we're trying to just transport the how it has been to the how it will be. But how it has been done is actually different for human services than for every other aspect of the budget. The town meeting has had the final say because there's a separate article that actually lists the recommendations of the Human Services Committee. And so it's all there. It's the total number and it's the individual allocation numbers. And we've seen in the last decade times when the total number changed, and we've seen times when one or two of the precise numbers change. And the action that day by town meeting is actually the binding decision for that expenditure. It doesn't go back to the select board to make an additional decision about it. So that's, again, we
You're right.
may decide that it's going to be different going forward, but historically, under our charter, with the warnings, the way they've been structured, town meeting actually has made the final decision. The money gets spent the way town meeting says it should be spent.
Instead of going to be how it's saying would like it to be.
Rick, we are so.
Actually, that's my point, is in an advisory process, it's, we'd like it to be X, is that okay? And somebody else gets to say whether or not it's okay. That's not how, for many, many years, that's not how this has functioned in Brattleboro. Under the current charter, year after year after year, the warnings have been written in such a way that RTM has made the decision about how much is spent and about which agencies get the money.
Can you say where that's referred to in the charter, because I'm trying to find it? Where is that spelled out in the charter?
I don't know if it is spelled out in the charter. I'm saying that under the charter, that has been the de facto process for many years, since prior to 2014.
Right. And I think what Bob, and I think you remember this too, Andy, but remember how everything used to be, like the $300 for Green Up Day used to be its own question, and then we go to the next one, and it'd be like $500 for groundwork for this next question. So we've always, I shouldn't say, I hate the word always, because that, for a long time, the town has always been, has been deciding human services outside the giant budget. We did it forever with each individual question, because we were voting each individual question. I shouldn't say never, as long as I can recollect, for the decades I've been alive, it's never, they haven't been intermingled with the budget. Like right now, all the departments, for town government, we don't vote this department, then another question on that department. You know what I mean? All of the operations of town government are in one thing, and we vote on the number that we want to spend, so we know how much taxes are going to be raised. On the human services thing, for decades and decades and decades, have done it where it was either that, as Bob laid out, or then they were put together. So I think it's tradition, maybe that's the word, or precedent, or the way we just do it.
But it's all been legal, because that's the way the warnings have been written.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
So I think another important point about the body of work is that there are a number of other areas of the charter where we don't think the current charter is adequate. We don't think it either addresses the thing fully, or that it's, there are places where it might address something extensively, but where it's confusing. And so there's places where we actually want to preserve processes that already exist, but are writing language to propose for charter changes that will make it much more explicitly clear that it's this, and this. And this, if we wish to preserve having this piece of expenditures dealt with by town meeting, rather than have the town meeting role through the committee be just advisory to the select board. If that's what we want to do, we should write language that makes it really explicitly clear that that's how it is to function.
Now, can I follow up with Bob? Or Hannah, is there something, and I know we can write whatever we want into state statute, but is there something in state statutes that says the human services budget has to be approved separately than the overall budget?
So let me read you, if I may, that statute. It's Title 24, 2691. It says, at a meeting, a town may appropriate such sums of money as it deems necessary for the support of social service programs and facilities within that town for its residents, okay? And it goes on to say it can be for transportation, nutrition, medical, et cetera, all right? So that's your statute that enables that. And I'm not disagreeing that your charter as a separate piece of legislation couldn't state otherwise. But I guess the point that I want to make is that if you are going to raise a sum of money, that's going to be voted upon depending on which type of program you finally rest on. I mean, one way to do it is you could say in a charter, every organization needs to petition to be on an Australian ballot. And I mean, yeah, you laugh, but I mean, you're looking at different ways of doing it. What I'm getting at is there are many different legal ways to do it. The point is that you cannot just delegate the ability to a committee to spend money. The spending of the money is done by the select board.
But what we're talking about is having the select board in October say this is the amount that we would suggest for human services funding. Then
Right,
it
so
goes to the open town meeting, where open town meeting says, yes, we agree with that number, or maybe we don't, and we wanna make it go up, or we wanna make it go down, they can make that decision.
Correct. And
Right.
whatever that decision is on the money, that's a sum of money. And then
Right, and
then under what you're looking at, you delegate that to your Human Services Committee to come up with a recommendation for allocating it.
Yeah.
But that recommendation is a recommendation to the Select Board, because the
Correct.
Select Board is the one that does the spending.
Correct. I think we get that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree that that's the default under the statute. Isn't it the case though, Bob, that similar to what we have today, if we wanted it, I'm not advocating for this necessarily. I want to, it's troubling me that in this conversation, it's over and over again seeming as though there is no choice, there is no discussion to be had. And I think it's more complicated than that. So if I'm wrong, to use the coined phrase, put me in my place. But I couldn't we write the charter to say everything that we've all been describing, you know, Select Board proposes, town meeting deals with it, the committee does its work, but at that last moment, that the recommendation of the committee comes back to a special town meeting to make the spending decision. It doesn't absolutely have to be the Select Board that makes the spending decision in the final analysis, because, or we've been doing it wrong for a long time, because for decades, that's what's been happening, is that the town meeting has been making that spending decision related to just this part of our town budget. And I think there's been such a robust discussion in the community around like what works and what doesn't work, and I think there's universal frustration with the dealing with 2 fiscal years number in the same meeting. So we're trying to resolve that, but as we resolve that, I think there's a robust conversation to continue to have around what we want it to be, and it doesn't feel to me like we are required to land in any particular place for what to you know, in what would be the sort of optimum process. Am I wrong about that?
You're not wrong, because the legislature, if they choose to approve whatever recommendations get to the legislature, is what would be done. But what you're then creating is potentially a entirely different body that has the recommendations and rights over the purse strings in a municipality. So you're creating different spheres of government within the town of Brattleboro. So you have Human Services as one whole entity of government, separate and apart from your Select Board. And that's a question that, if you want to have that philosophical debate, that's fine. I'm not standing in anybody's way on that.
But I'm sorry, just to put the finer point on, do you disagree that is how we have been functioning, that different sphere, that separate single sphere for just that one purpose? The reason why this is gnawing at me so much is because it feels to me like that's what we already have. And so we have a question to decide of, do we want it that way or do we want to do something different? But the final binding action has been taken at town meeting year after year after year. It hasn't gone to the Select Board for any further action to dispense the funds.
But it's been the Select Board that does the warning, that puts forward all of what the Human Services Committee recommends.
That's true.
So that's where the Select Board has given it to and made it a special warning.
Got it.
Different Select Boards in different towns put their human services right into their general budget, and in my view, better to have it as a separate vote based on the statute.
Yeah.
But some do it that way. Some have individual articles. And so it's still the Select Board putting it out there for that vote.
Okay.
But even when it's approved down, you know, this organization gets that and the next one gets such and such, it's still the Select Board that is writing the checks and doing the distributions. Just like if you raise money in a budget for, buying a new grader, it's not some committee that goes and buys the grader. It's the town, it's the select board that does that.
Gemma.
Yeah.
Hi, Jenna Seymour, District 8 RTM. I'd just like to point out that the final sentence in 24 VSA 2691 is, "The authority herein granted is not in derogation of other local powers to allocate funds." 2691 does not specify how a town must go about allocating human services funding. It simply says that a town may do this. The defect that I see here is that no place that I'm able to read in the Brattleboro Charter as amended for 2023 specifies this function, whether it's going to be for RTM or done by the Select Board. And that's something that I think that the Charter Revision Committee should definitely be looking at, making a firm commitment for the town as to which way it's going to go. Given that we have a tradition so far, a long-standing tradition, I would say, of RTM being the ones who approve the Human Services budget, I think that's the recommendation that the Charter Revision Commission should be making for charter changes. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we move on to the next item?
Okay, well, I just wanna figure out what do we need, like, what is it that we need to move forward with this, because we don't have a lot of time. I mean, I don't know if we do people in general, like, is there anything else, any other ideas that people have, I guess, about how to do this? You know, what we've got on the table is a Human Services Committee. Somehow, we have two things, whether it's the Select Board or it's an election, being, nobody has said yet that we don't want a Human Services Committee. So I think we agree on we want a Human Services Committee. It's how we get that Human Services Committee.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're all in agreement that the amount should be voted on by the town.
Yeah.
And the real question is how it goes from there.
Right, Peter.
I think, as has been true for us with some of the other sections, it might be useful to see some language. It won't necessarily be the right language the first try, but see some language and decide whether we like it or not. I think on this particular one, there's a really substantive conversation to be had around that final action that we haven't landed in a place yet, so that's gonna have to be addressed. But I strongly suggest, I do think it's important that we specify how this is to be done, based on let me not go deeper in that rabbit hole. I think it's important that we specify it, and we're already planning on expanding the finance article for out of similar motivation for certain other aspects of the town's finances, where right now our charter under finance really just deals with capital improvements, and we want to have some information in there about how the budget process works, and we've had prior discussion about that, some language that needs to be tweaked to reflect that. I'd suggest that that's the place within the charter where it would be appropriate to have a separate section of the finance article that speaks to human services funding. And we've got 4 meetings coming up, we could address this, August 7th and then beyond if necessary, to look at some specific language that would address the putting into that section of the charter some specific steps related to this process.
Yeah, because as Gemma was just pointing out, we agree, because if you do look at the charter, there's nothing in there about how our town budget comes. I mean, when we were reading it, we're going like, there's nothing here. So we do have draft language for that.
Right. And I think
And
we
this
could
is-
similarly draft language for this. Again, we need to work together on getting that to where we want it to be for our recommendation to the voters, but it feels like that's a step, that's the step forward we could take towards resolving this question.
Now, Hannah, is there, if you haven't seen the Essex language, but is that something that could help us?
It's not in their charter, but it's a
Right.
select board appointed committee.
Okay. But they have, I wonder if there's something, is it a policy statement or something? Okay.
And that's just about how much, it's a sort of a standing policy that it's 1% of the budget.
Okay.
If I may just offer a point of clarification.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
I just want to say that I think it needs to be specified under the duties of either the select board or of town meeting that the human services budget is determined by that body and not by the other. And as 2691 states, this is not in derogation to the power of the select board to make allocations for all other purposes. It's just, it's a cutout for human services that's in state law to allow towns to do this however they like. So, thank you.
Randy?
Just a point of clarification, Hannah or Bob. So does the Essex standard, some of the other things we're quoting or questioning, set a legal precedent, legal standard that when all this goes out of the town and it goes to the legislature, that the committees that has to go through both in the House and the Senate and then obviously the governor, how is that handled, like if we're completely different than any of those models they could look to?
I think Peter can speak to this because he
Yeah, so that's, it goes through the process you described, the government operations committees in each of the two chambers, and then the full chamber, and then when they've all agreed, when it's been passed in identical form by both chambers, it goes to the governor. It speaks only to those ways in which we in fact are setting ourselves apart. Now, it's not to say necessarily we'd be the only place that does it a certain way. Many of the charter provisions are, there's, I think it's 60 some odd charters, if I remember correctly, for municipalities in Vermont. And so, sometimes there's a particular wording that was in one charter that other folks, we're doing that actually. We're borrowing from some of the others where we see some wording that is nice and clear and serves a purpose that we think would be useful here. So we're going to propose that be incorporated into ours. So that would be a case where there might be 30 other communities that have the same language, but we 30 communities are setting ourselves apart by saying this is the way we do it in our town. And it's not the same as how it's done in statute. Because if we were just going to do it the same as all the communities of 251 towns in Vermont, if we were just going to do it the same as is set forth in the standard of the statute, we wouldn't need that language in our charter. Does that make sense?
I'm just looking at you've got a heck of a process you've gone through already, and you're still going to be going through.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying hurdles yet to come.
Absolutely.
Lots of people are asking lots of questions. So
Absolutely.
and they don't understand that a legislator from a different county, different town, can say, I don't like this
They
wording,
need to have a say.
or I want to take that out, or even worse yet, you know what, we're going to add something.
Yeah.
And that whole part people don't know
And that
about.
absolutely can happen and does happen. There's recent examples of communities who brought up charter amendments that were pretty standard language. A particular example I'm aware of is several years ago in the town of Bennington, they wanted to have some language that is common in other charters about attendance requirements for select board members, and that if you missed a certain number of meetings, you could be removed from the select board. I can't tell you what the political dynamics were that caused that thing to go sideways, but the legislature refused to approve it. I don't understand that, but it happened.
on that point, if it's in 30 other charters and 30 other towns, that doesn't mean they have to approve ours for
That's
any
right.
reason.
Well, that was where
Yep.
I was trying to get at if they go by precedent. Because when I watched up there or tried to understand it, it seemed like they're all over the place.
No, it's
Often, yeah.
And we have to remember, and this is gonna sound bad, but in some cases, it's based on the whim of the person who's sitting on a committee and that bill happens to be in front of them.
Yeah.
And it could be, because now I've become a student of charter changes and I've watched many of these hearings and watched these poor people like us sitting there thinking you have this thing that's so innocent.
Right.
And there's this one person on that committee that has a bugaboo about that one thing.
Right.
And the whole thing, I just watch these poor people and
I
you're
don't
like.
think many of our reps are on.
No.
They actually don't have to discuss it at all.
No.
So that the chair actually the chair of each committee in the legislature has so much authority that they are allowed to do something called leaving it on the wall. So they put all of the proposed bills for their committee on the wall, and they only pull off the wall the ones they want to talk about. And
The other ones are out on the
it
wall.
often happens that at least during the initial session that it's proposed, a charter change sits on the wall, and you got to go back and give it another try.
When Brattleboro voted overwhelmingly to have 16-year-old
It stayed on the wall.
it took several years for it to even be discussed.
That's right.
And then it got vetoed.
Gotta be.
That's right.
And then it
And
got vetoed.
And
it got overridden, but.
And
Yeah.
like any other bill up there, charter changes have been used as bargaining chips.
Yep.
I'll vote for your thing if you vote for mine. So we're going into this.
Right. Which.
And in the
It shouldn't scare
meantime, what
us
we've
either.
been trying to do, continue to try to do, is the best job we can to lay out a updated charter that makes internal sense, as well as having like individual pieces make good sense, that they relate to each other in a logical way, so that if it gets approved in the manner that it's been proposed, first by our voters here in town and then by the legislature and the governor, that it'll be a good, strong, solid document that works well. That's the whole point, is good governance. And yeah, along the way, it might get rejected locally, and there might be a whole nother wave of activity around this, and it could get messed with up in the legislature.
So
That's true.
Select board doesn't say anything on it, you just put it to the voters?
So the decision will be made by the voters. We're going to be taking our body of recommendations to the select board so that they can put it on. If we were not recommending the
I'm
elimination
sorry, can you,
of RTM,
can you please, it's really hard to hear.
if we were not recommending the elimination of RTM, then our recommendations would go straight to RTM. But because we're recommending the elimination of RTM, we don't think it's appropriate that our recommendations go there. And in fact, actually, we in an earlier discussion had decided we didn't think it was appropriate. We thought it ought to go to a townwide vote. We've since learned that it has to go to a townwide vote. That the rescission of RTM can only be done by a townwide vote.
Right, I remember the meeting where you
Yeah.
found that.
So that's why it's hinging on that particular piece of this, that we're on a route that where our body of recommendations will go to the select board on the way to the people.
So the select board does what? I'm just trying to get the process.
The select board, I can tell you what we're gonna do.
Right, well, I
can't tell you
I
what-
wanted, like, you finish your work, you go to the select board,
Right.
then what? That's all I
Well,
was.
what we do is we finish up with all of our recommendations, it'll be in a nice tidy little, nice document. We are gonna bring that to the select board, and what we are gonna do is we're gonna say to the select board, we ask you to accept our recommendations and pass them on to the voters to decide. That's what we're gonna ask,
Okay.
to say to the select board. What the select board does, I don't know. But so that's our thing, is to say, we've been working on this for way too many years. We put a lot of thought into this. We hope that you will accept it and allow the voters to vote on our recommendations. Then if the voters, say everything goes with which my dream, and the voters say yes, then it goes to the legislature. And that's where the whole bumpiness can start. And we have no guarantee, as Peter said, it'll go up there at the end. What we want is for, that's why we're proposing a vote in November, so we can go to the legislature right away if the voters approve it. So they can start looking at it, but they're not gonna look at it the first thing they do in January, because they're gonna be bombarded with so many things going on up there. So we don't know when they'll take it up. I mean, our wish would be for them to take it up during the 2026 legislative session, so that we could get it done. But once it hits like the State House, it's
like a
we
black
lose
hole.
control.
It's like a black hole.
I mean, we're gonna do our best to bring it to the attention of everybody, but there's,
Well, my guess is it's 2 years, but just looking at the history of charters, but yeah.
yeah.
But the first thing that has to happen is the vote on whether to do away with RTM.
Which is separate from the charter amendments and
Right.
does not go to the state
Right,
Right.
right. Correct.
Sorry, District 9 rep. Can you explain why you're trying to fast track this through and make us have the expense of a special election for this particular subject?
I kind of take issue with fast track because we were appointed in December of 2022. And we have always said our goal is to get this to the legislature in January 2026. When we looked at the calendar on our first meeting in 2023, we looked, and you know when you have to get your work done to get it to a certain legislative session. So we knew we wanted to get it to the legislature in 2026. We have been working since our first meeting in 2023 on a timeline, and I'm happy to show you the timeline. And you can look at all the things we have been.
So you're saying at a much earlier point, you were aware that this timeline would require a special election when we didn't have any other elections and the additional expense of a special election, instead of waiting till the next legislative session, which would allow us to do this in the context of a town meeting election, which would be appropriate for this and consistent with the subject matter, or the following November's election, which is another election that we were going to have anyway and would not add additional expense and cause people to have to try and get their butts out there at a time when that's the only thing that's on the ballot.
All I can tell you is there's not some grand conspiracy going on up
But
here.
what would be the harm in waiting till the next normal election to cover this?
The legislature meets from January until May, June, some point. There is a deadline, I believe it's at the end of February, where they like to have everything sort of like called the crossover date, where they cross it over from the House to the Senate and vice versa. And
I know all this.
well, you asked a question, I'm trying to answer.
Okay.
So I would appreciate if you could let me respond.
Yeah.
And the way that the regularly scheduled elections are working, if we were to vote on this in March, it would not go to the legislature until the 2027 session. And as Kate said, we've been on this committee since 2022. I did the math. Just sitting in this room in meetings, we have been here for 56 hours, not counting tonight.
So why wasn't it on the last town meeting
I'm sorry,
election?
can you please let me finish? I would really appreciate it if you could let me finish. And then I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Okay.
We are not trying to burden the town with another election, but our work needs to come to a conclusion at some point. And the longer we delay that, the longer that's going to take for all of the reasons we just explained about the number of steps after our work concludes before this gets ratified.
So.
And we have been in talks with the town clerk, we have been in talks with the town manager, we have discussed this timeline with all of the people that this would impact, and they are in agreement with our plan.
Right. We didn't come up with this on our own. We have been, all this time, we have, as you see, the town attorney comes to our meetings. We talked to Hillary Francis about this. So we have been, we have been very deliberate. And I can't tell you, Frick, how after I go home after these meetings, I get my little timeline out, and we're always looking at it again, and we're deciding how we're gonna do it. And we have goals. So there's no grand scheme here, there's no grand plan. We check, balance everything, and we're on the timeline that we need to be on to get this thing done. And we don't feel like we're rushing.
I'm trying to understand what the need is that is so pressing as of this November as opposed to next town meeting day or last town meeting day
Well, I'll let Peter
or
take
some
it. We'll
other
let Peter take it
regularly
back
scheduled
Can I
election.
suggest that that's not what we're discussing under this
Right.
item on the agenda, which
Right.
is Human Services and the
Yes,
Finance
thank you,
Committee?
thank you.
But we can have some more discussion about that
You
at
know
the
what?
appropriate time.
You know what, we're gonna talk at the end, review work plan and timeline moving forward. And if you wanna talk about it then, we will happily,
So
at
at
every
that point,
meeting.
I'm
at
hoping
every-
that you'll come up with an actual answer to my question. Thank you.
Okay, let's go, let's continue.
I'd
Peter,
like
thank
to
you.
suggest, so that we can move forward from
Yeah.
this discussion into the other items on tonight's agenda. That since we already have, Hannah's doing the lion's share of the drafting,
Yeah.
but specific to select board, town manager, and budget, or financial, I should say, select board, town manager, and finance sections. I'm doing a fair amount of it, you've done some of it, you know, the three of us have collaborated around that. I'd like to suggest that this piece at least, and it makes sense to me that since there's some relationship between this and finance, and the finance committee, that we say this about both pieces, the human services piece we've discussed tonight, the finance committee piece we discussed last week. We've received recommendations from each of those two current committees around what would be good to address in the charter. I'd like to suggest that between the three of us, we draft language that can come forward August 7th with other language that's going to be proposed that night for getting to action on a bunch of different topics we've already talked about but not yet acted upon. And I want to acknowledge that some of those other things, we were more precise in the place we were landing substantively before we went to drafting, but we've got the 4 meetings in August. I think it would be good if at the first one of those, we're looking at some language around these two things. And we won't nail it the first time. There'll be some more discussion and some modification to it that's probably going to be needed, but I think that'll move us forward on these two pieces.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Does David have anything else?
Yeah. Do you have any, this is your last time to talk to us, because August 7th, we'll be talking about this again. And
No, I think we've covered everything that we reviewed as a committee, and have covered that and more. So you know, I think we've all been able to kind of walk through the process as to what we see, and I wish you luck.
thank you. And thanks for the committee's input. Tell everybody we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for giving us a chance.
Okay, we're gonna skip over the review of the select board and town manager stuff and do that at the next meeting, so that we can go through the proposed changes so far.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll get through all of them, but
We'll start.
yeah.
And just in case anybody, we're gonna be looking at this document that's all redlined and stuff, and I think there's some over there. And just to put this in context, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah, this includes things that we've talked about so far, but it's not all inclusive of what we've talked about so far. Because there are things that we said we would do, but we haven't like pulled the trigger.
Right.
So I think what we wanna do is walk through this document.
So this should incorporate, there was one where, I don't know if we all recall this meeting where it was about the timing of a recall vote. We had Hillary here and we went back and forth on and it wasn't clear to me from the minutes what we actually landed on.
Yeah.
I know we had motioned and approved something, but other than that, this should have everything that we have made a motion to put in the charter.
And so anybody out watching us now, there are more things that will be in here, but they're not all here now. So I don't want anyone to think this is the final version, because it is not.
And can I just ask, I don't know that we need Bob for this part of this
Yeah, oh, yeah,
discussion, I wanna
sure.
let him go.
Unless he wants to be entertained.
Sure.
Hey Bob,
Thank you,
thank you, Bob. Unless you
Really?
wanna stay.
Oh, you love it, perfect.
He's already gone.
And again, things may come up as we're talking about this, I will keep notes of what. And I'm gonna go take my giant spreadsheet and compare it
Yeah.
to.
So we had discussed possibly leaving Article 1 as sort of a placeholder and amending this language in some way, but we all agreed that this town history and all that wasn't really relevant to the purpose of the charter and that it should be removed. And so ultimately, I think it's best if we just take it out. We're gonna have to renumber articles anyway because of the school board. So my proposal would just be to take out the preamble in its entirety. And then obviously Article 2 becomes Article 1.
Can we have the opportunity to ask questions after each article, or would you like to take public
sure.
comments at different times?
Yeah, just, again, we have already voted on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
If you wanna ask questions,
You can
I'm
ask a
just trying to
if
put it
what
in
I say
context.
can't make any impact, then.
You can
I think
change
we're
your
okay,
vote.
right?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
we
change
can.
your vote. I'm just
You
putting
may
it in
say
context.
something totally compelling, so.
All right. Covered. Tom Mosikowski, District 8. So you've already voted on this. Yeah, a lot of it has seemed to me, like you said, history, but some things that don't actually have much enforcement or power. But do any of you ever recall, or does anyone recall a time when something from the preamble was used to justify something or argue something? Yeah, no. Okay. I realize it's not being crossed out because the things in it are disagreed with. It's for the reasons that were already said, but I'll just highlight the part where it says towards the end of the preamble, replete with checks and balances. So I hope that you all maintain the spirit of that when you craft things and make language, and realize that a government that is, solely select board and town manager is more efficient and simpler, but maybe it doesn't honor all the energy and enthusiasm and thoroughness that multiple competing, not the right word, but multiple collaborating different branches or bodies or efforts contribute.
So Article 1 will become, or Article 2 will become Article 1. This was titled Organization of Town Government, but that isn't really what's in Article 2. And I know that at one of our previous meetings, we talked about the need to sort of rework this section in general. So I just sort of went through and cleaned it up, but we can go back and change this as needed. The youth voter thing, it was tricky because this definition needs to be in here. But it seems weird to sort of put this as the first section, but you need the definition before the references, and the references start immediately thereafter. So, we can talk about how to reframe that, but so I removed the general town meeting and representative town meeting because under our proposal, there would not be that distinction, there'd be no need to define those. And the green language added to the youth voter was, I believe, section 11. And I just, because of the way that this is restructured, pulled that out and moved it up here.
And then one of the things that we talked about too is at the end of this, we may find that we want to reorder stuff.
Right.
But we won't know that until we get the whole thing, like the language.
Yeah, I think that's a
I
great
tried
point.
not to do any big structural edits, I'm just sort of trying to start with the cleanup.
Totally. And to that point, this is spot on, I believe, to what it needs to say and what we ask you to do. And it does feel weird that it's the lead off of the whole document, and so we'll get to dealing with that.
Right, maybe there are definitions that we decide we need to, and it can go back to being called definitions,
Sure.
I don't know, but,
Sure.
or it can be moved elsewhere, but that's just how it is for now. So in section 2, the elected officers, obviously we removed representative town meeting members. And then thereafter, there's every single one said elected at large because representative town meeting managers are elected by district. And so because everyone is elected at large, it seemed superfluous to clarify that.
Do you have an objection to having it say then in the introductory language that the fellow town shall, actually you can't say shall elect at large. I think it's useful to declare that we don't have districts, that the select board members and other elected officers are elected from the community at large. Could you blend into the first sentence or make a second, make 2 sentences in the introduction, but have it be clear so that I'm fine with taking it out of each individual one. I think that is not necessary, but it'd be, I think, useful to say all officers serve, or all officers are elected at large.
Okay. And then just as a point of clarification, throughout the terms town, select board, and charter were all lowercase. I believe they should be uppercase because we are using them as proper nouns. So those changes are made everywhere. I'm not gonna identify them every time they're done. Starting with what was E is now D, I split this out. Because it had this other offices are elected for 1 year include, blah, blah, blah. It seemed better to just have those each be their, like this include sort of implies there could be others, and so it seemed cleaner to just break them out this way. So the moderator was elected each year to serve for a 1 year term. A first and second constable who are each elected each year for a 1 year term. And then F is an advisory budget committee, which is in statute as one of the positions that can be elected by Australian ballot. It does say 5 members, but it can be some other number, so I went with 7 because I believe that's what the finance committee had asked for. And I can't recall, I know I was on Zoom for that meeting, I was sick, but I have them all serving 1 year terms and elected each year, which I think was what they said.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah, okay, so that's that, and the reason it's being called an advisory budget committee is because that's the language that's used in statute, and it just seemed to be, to require less sort of explanation than like a finance committee. So that's added there to make that clear that that's an elected position. If we decide we also want to add human services there, we can do that.
Can I ask you a question? I think they said, maybe, I wrote this down, didn't they want to see 5 to 7?
Yes.
I thought they actually said 5 to 8, so
5
that's
to
something
8.
we should double check.
Yeah, I have
And like not fewer than X,
Yeah.
normal than other, which,
I have it.
which, that is my recollection that they suggested a range. I think on that particular point, it's probably better if we're gonna create these panels as elected bodies, the better that there be a certain number of seats.
Right.
So I have no objection to it being 7 as within the 5 to 8 range.
Yeah.
I do think we wanna take another look, and maybe it's a conversation the 3 of us can have when we deal with the other drafting that we just talked about, rather than going into a lot of depth tonight, because I could be convinced otherwise, but
In November, they said 7.
Well, they said
they
5
said
to 8.
it just like 2
They
weeks
said
ago.
5, they said 5 to 8.
They said 5 to
Yeah.
8.
But I agree with
So-
Peter though, if we're gonna put it, you're
Right.
elected.
So we say 7.
It might be that we put somewhere else, like there is a floor, like
Yeah.
if there are less than 5 members, you have to appoint more or
Sure,
something.
something like that.
Yeah.
But there is some language, and I see that you proposed in this draft, striking it. In some prior conversation we had around it, we all had around it in this, in a public meeting, we were talking about ways in which that section might be modified rather than eliminated. And it does include some responsibilities that are broader than just looking at the proposed budget. So I think we might want to continue to call it the finance committee here, even though this is the term from statute, because I think we also might want to keep the specific other duties that were mentioned. So I'd just like to explore that further and bring it back. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think because that language from before sort of said like, oh, they're there to advise the RTM, that I liked the use of advisory committee here.
I don't have a problem with advisory.
Yeah.
The term advisory budget committee feels constraining in a way that I think we had some consensus. We wanted finance committee to be looking at more broadly at town finances in ways that had been set forth in the prior chart.
Yeah, and we have the definition that we came up with way back in November. Way back. Tom, did you have something?
The last thing Peter said was what I was going to say, which is that the statute for advisory budget committee, it's just focusing on the budget, but our current finance committee is talking about all expenditures.
Yeah.
And I think that's valuable.
And financial processes as well. Yeah.
So again, like this whole section, it seems like it was sort of put together piecemeal with things getting added at different points, and the titles didn't always make a whole lot of sense. So I broke out what was section 3 into a smaller section that is just the provisions for early voting. And then did some renumbering to make it consistent with the rest of the charter. The added green language in what was subsection B is now subsection 2, was subsection 4. I just sort of incorporated that up because I think that, obviously the youth voter provision came later, so that just sort of got tacked on everywhere, and so I'm trying to sort of fold that into the existing language. And it actually before said that they had to sign this oath, which says they're 18 years old, so that was contradictory. So that's that addition, just to sort of clean that language up. Again, this says that they have to fill out this form, and then the next section says it's a certificate, so I changed that to form. And I just eliminated 3 because that's just how you vote. That didn't really seem to require the clarification in the chart. And then this was previously subsection B of the early voting section, so I just sort of reworked that into this section on how the tabulator and ballot bin are stored during early election. And then the new subsection D goes with what we had voted to do, which was to take out statutory references. And so I clarified that it's other provisions because there we have these provisions. So any other provisions are as allowed by law. And just took out the statutory reference there. And then the representative town meeting member voting obviously gets completely struck. And then what was subsection D is already addressed in the previous part about who gets elected. So that didn't seem to need to be in here twice. And then I reworked this into a new section on ballots, and there was a typo where it said insure when it should have said ensure, so I fixed that. And then section 5 is probably the one where I maybe took the most liberties, but it's about who can be a write-in candidate. And there's a lot of stuff in here that references the RTM enabling legislation and stuff like that, so just clarify that anyone who wants to be a write-in candidate has to notify the town clerk prior to the close of the poll, which is how it is now. And I thought it was important to add in that they have to otherwise be qualified to be elected to that office. And then the RTM stuff gets struck in full. A finance committee, what we already discussed, so we can maybe pull some of that out, rework it, and put it maybe somewhere else in the charter because it's not really appropriate here.
Yeah, and again, I think the logical place for that is likely the new expanded finance article.
And this section 5, again, sort of seemed redundant. This is both in the select board section and in the earlier section about how select board members are elected and school directors are getting struck throughout. The library trustees, I know that was something that we needed to look into more. I don't know if we've done that work, but that's why I just sort of highlighted it to come back to. And I had on the copy I sent that had made comments, so they didn't come through on this draft, but one thing that I noted is that the trustees are elected at the town meeting, and I don't know if we want that to continue to be the process or if we want to also have that be voted on some other way, or I don't know if this has to be this way, but this whole section just needs to be looked at a little bit more. The only other edits in here, we're taking out representative town meeting and making it annual town meeting, and again, capitalization. Consolidation of services, just took out all the references to RTM and the school district.
Quick question there. So that was one from our prior discussion where we were gonna delete it unless you and Bob advised that we need it. If what this provides for is just consistent with statute, which I believe it is, then we were gonna just delete it so that we don't.
Okay, I'll
restate
double
it.
check that.
Yeah, because that came in, I think that was one of the things that came in like in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't,
Yeah.
it was a personal preference of somebody that's.
Right, so, and then.
But if we need it, we'll keep
Right,
it
it
and
might have been a
modify it this
personal
way.
preference for a good reason.
Yeah, so I'll double check that. Like I said, I went through all the minutes and just looked for
Yeah.
motions, so anything
Yeah.
that we discussed that
Yeah, we
wasn't
didn't have a
actually
motion.
finalized didn't really make it into this draft. The conflict of interest, I know we had voted on that,
Yeah.
but then we later voted to take out superfluous references to statute.
Mhm.
And all we said was that it's the same as it is by statute, so I suggested just deleting that entirely.
Because that was something mine that you wanted, like a sentence.
Yeah, we had approved a sentence that just referenced the statute.
Right.
But then we later said, let's take out all the references to statute that are not there for some relevant reason, that we can add it back in if we want. But I was just sort of, that was what I came up with based on what we have discussed over the 2.5 years we've been doing this.
Do you have a preference on that?
Yeah, I'd like to leave that sentence that we approved in, because of, all the other committees. Like the planning committee and DRB.
Did our language include committees?
It's just a generic.
It
I
was
thought it
just
was-
a generic,
Yeah, cause the ethics rules don't apply to committees.
no, but the conflict of interest, but
I'll have to go back and look at, I can put back in what we approved and we can look at it again.
because,
Conflict
I
of
mean,
interest is different than code of ethics.
But the ethics addresses conflicts of interest, and I think what we had said was conflicts of interest are addressed as per that.
Okay. Under ethics.
but the new municipal statute, the very long one, does talk about conflicts of interest.
Right, and so we had just sort of referred back to that.
Yes, and I'd like to have it in there because if there's any question, for example, on DRB or on the planning commission or there are other groups where a member has to recuse themselves, if there's a conflict of interest, I'd like to have something in the charter that you can point to and say,
Okay, well, I'll pull what we had before and add it back in, and we can look at it next time.
because that's the only reason I wanted it in. Cause it was an issue when I was chair of DRB.
And then, again, I don't know, I need to say this every time, this just took out the reference to RTM. And then, as I mentioned, section 11 got incorporated into what is now section 1. Everything in this first section on powers of the people.
Can I ask a question before you go on? Oh, yeah, just a quick point on this. Limits of terms of office is shaded in the same way that the stuff above is, but it seems like you've recommended the appropriate modification there, which is just pulling out representative town meeting. So
What do you mean
did you
shaded?
mean for us to go back and revisit it the way we're gonna revisit the
I think
consolidation and the library trustees?
you might getting a bleed through or something.
Yeah,
Because
it,
ours
You don't have
isn't
it pink?
show- Yeah, no, it's
No,
not.
mine is not.
Wow.
Is it shaded? Mine's not.
Mine is shaded.
Yeah,
Oh, mine's not.
Huh.
So, do you have a comment on it?
okay, interesting.
Is there a comment on it?
Oh, you're getting little comments.
Yeah.
I don't get
Oh.
comments.
I put a comment that maybe that should be moved to the section on committees.
I see, that's why it's shaded, because
Yeah.
it moved to committee section, got it, got it.
Because, the limit on terms of office does sort of relate to elections, but I didn't know.
It actually doesn't, because it doesn't apply to the select board, it applies to the select board's appointees. So
Right.
that's a good catch, we should put it in the committees section.
Yeah.
Okay,
If we wanna keep it.
Thanks,
if we wanna keep it.
if
So-
we wanna keep
So yeah, there are some comments that I made throughout that didn't make it in, but.
Okay.
Mine was comments.
it. And then Tom?
Oh, yeah, Tom, I'm sorry.
With the striking of the RTM section, the 4 ratifications, is there a provision in base state statute for open town meeting to do those ratifications? I know they're not exercised very often, but as a matter of principle and
We're
checks and
actually
balances.
proposing that those no longer be acted upon at town meeting, that the two who are staff members be in the powers and duties of the town manager, and the town attorney be in the powers and duties of the select board.
Okay.
This power section, again, is just cleaning up using proper nouns. And then, section B, I don't think is relevant with the recommendation to remove RTM. It basically just clarifies that RTM can do everything that isn't delegated to someone else. So if there's no RTM, there's no need for that language. I don't remember why I highlighted this, quite frankly. Is there a comment on that one too, on the petition?
I'm gonna go check my notes on that too.
You talking about this section?
Yeah. Oh, it's because it just says warning of an article. I thought maybe it would be relevant to say warning for the meeting.
The next annual town meeting.
Right, like to I don't know if warning needs greater definition. Eventually, when I got to the end of the document, there's that glossary which defines what a warning is, so.
So, I think it is good to be specific, but we already are in paragraph 2. That it goes on the next annual town meeting. Article on the warning, shall place the article on the warning for the next annual meeting.
Yeah, that's, I didn't do a lot of editing to my, so that might have just sort of been like something where I had this thought and eventually clarified itself.
Yeah, so I'm saying, I think that your thought was good, but I think it's already covered, so we wouldn't need to put it in A, because it's already in 2.
Right.
Does that make?
Yeah. The language in this first one was shifted to match up with every other similar language throughout this for other changes. Like if you look at the petition for inclusion of a warning to adopt an ordinance, it says, and shall state that it is binding, and so I just made this language mirror that so that they're consistent.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Section 2, A sub 1, where the stating that it is advisory only is taken out at the beginning and moved to the end of the sentence. And then I took out the rest of this because it will be but like this again is just sort of like an RTM holdover that did not need to be in there anymore, I believe.
Which part did you take out?
Everything after the first sentence.
So we're left with an initiative defeated into,
Your A1, you're talking.
A1.
A1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it sort of clarifies if you want it to be by Australian ballot and not by a representative town meeting, but based on our previous conversations about what would go into an open meeting, an advisory question would seem to be something that will lend itself to a ballot, and I don't know if we need to clarify that somewhere else, that these are voted on by ballot, but that's why I struck that language, but again, we can discuss further, but it seemed unnecessary to sort of have this really long explanation about the included RTM references, but we can switch it up if we need to.
Well, actually, if we read it, A1 says, such petition should be signed by at least 5%, and should state that it's advisory only, and then A2 says what's gonna happen.
Yeah, right, so you're okay to cross all that stuff off.
Yeah.
Because it flows in number 2 that it's going to the annual town meeting.
Right.
That's how I'm reading it.
So then in sub 2, that again, there's just all this extra language that didn't need to be there. So it was cleaned up. And then what was sub 3, and then this sub 3 is a new section. If you look at the end of sub 2, it says neither body, and then if you jump to the last sentence of the page, before it basically said either the select board or the school board couldn't deny it for any reason other than insufficient signatures, and I just cleaned that up.
You merged it into one nice.
Yeah. And then I took out 5 because it seems like if it's an article to reflect public sentiment, it didn't really seem like it needed to be defined if it can only be denied for insufficient signatures. Like it just seemed like that was sort of an unnecessary definition. And then 6 again was rolled into that new sub 3.
Say again why 6 is deleted.
It's been rolled into 3.
It's the same
Got
language.
it, got it, thank you.
In B, the only substantive change is taking out sub 4, because that was basically just a vote after the vote by RTM, which again wouldn't happen anymore. And then I don't think I made any substantive changes in C. It's just cleaning up the language and making it consistent with the rest of the petition, or the rest of the chapter.
Now, we did talk about adding a new D to Article 3,
Okay.
which was way back on August 15th, 2024.
Who's counting?
It was we talked about a petition to get a matter directly on town meeting morning without having to petition the select board and have it be binding. And I can go back and get the notes from the meeting to remind ourselves of that.
if it wasn't motioned and voted on, I didn't do it, so.
No, we didn't vote.
Yeah.
We talked about it, we were gonna draft some language, so I will go pull that back up, because that was last August. But I'll look that up.
And then 3, I just clarified that this is how to have a vote for reconsideration of an ordinance. And took out all of the town meeting references.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I've got a question about this one, or a point. I think now with the proposed changes to section 3 here, reconsideration, it makes it addressing the same point that base statute does about, they call it a referendum. And I think this is that what was done with? Anyway, I'll just read the statute. It's 24 VSA 1973. It says an ordinance or rule adopted by a municipality may be disapproved by a vote of a majority of the qualified voters of the municipality voting on the question at an annual or special meeting, and it takes 5%.
Well, this is 20, so that's why it's different.
Okay. So same topic, but instead of the base statute's 5%, we have a 4 times higher requirement. It's a question to reconsider the select board's decision. Okay, just want to make sure you all are aware of
And
that.
one thing we did talk about was looking at all the signature requirements. But we never really, we haven't,
Yeah, this is
Done
not
that.
final, this is
Right.
just incorporating changes we've approved.
Yeah.
Up until now.
yeah, and it's on our giant list.
Right.
One of the things that we said we were gonna do is go through and look at what the petition requirements were for everything.
Okay. So just, was it last autumn when someone did the petition, for the safety or downtown safety ordinance, and they needed 5% because they were to re-vote on the select board's passed ordinance. And what they did is they didn't take advantage of a charter provision. They took, because that would have been 20% and gone to RTM. They took advantage of the statute's 5%, right? I think, and it went to.
It was a special RTM.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a special.
Yeah.
It was a special RTM.
But they only needed 5%, right?
I
That's
don't,
all that they got.
that I don't know.
Yeah, but so, yeah, we'll have to
But now
go
if
back
we're
and look at our
totally
notes.
overriding that state statute with this, then they would
Well,
have
this is,
needed 20%.
this is what's in the charter
So-
already, the black language hasn't
Yeah,
been touched.
just bringing
Yeah.
attention to that.
And we do have it, it's one of the things that is our, is
Okay.
our things, but I appreciate you saying it.
And then in the referendum, I just took out the possibility for it to be signed by 50 RTM members, because there wouldn't be any. And then section 5 is based on language that we discussed and approved. So I don't think we need to really walk through that any further than we did back then, so we had a very long discussion about it.
I agree with that. Could we take a 5-minute break?
Oh, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Oh, we've been sitting here for a long time. 5-minute break.
Could I make
Because-
one comment? I gotta leave. But I just wanted to make one parting comment, that I do think that this human services needs to be tightened up. It's been tradition, but it's also been a drift in recent years. I was on my phone, not doing my personal things. I was studying the minutes of past meetings, and I don't think the RTM adjusted the budget for human services until 2020. It was related to COVID and a perception that there was vast human increase of need. But I do think that one of the biggest drivers of this critique of RTM is that RTM has become a tax-raising body, and it wasn't before then. We took the number that the select board gave us, and the committee was simply to reduce the amount of debate time. And in 2020, by raising, I believe it was 2%, and then there's been a tradition of this whole discussion about, and I really think that needs to be tightened up.
Yeah.
Because the perception is that there's no accountability for that. And I personally feel like it should go back to the select board.
We'll be back.
Because then the select board is our money. That's the only place I've searched the charter. The only thing is section R in Article 4 is the only place that talks about spending money, and it's the select board. And when I was on the steering committee, one of our frustrations, we couldn't do any of the things we wanted to do to reform RTM. Why? We had no money and no access to money. RTM reviews and approves and offers suggestions, but it cannot raise money. And I think that's been one of the frustrations in these tough economic times, that the public perceives RTM has this sort of ability to reach into the taxpayers' pockets without full accountability. So I think it really has to be tightened up in your charter, and I'm in awe of the work you're doing, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Andy, August 7th,
Revisiting it.
August 7th.
I will be back.
Night, Andy.
Good
One
night,
quick thing
thank
before
you.
you start taking us through the next 3, I just want anybody who's still with us to know, or anybody who may watch this later, there's some substantive changes that we have discussed and tentatively embraced, but not yet refined the language for in each of the next 3 sections, Select Board, Town Manager, and Finance. So we're gonna go through tonight the things that are clear, that Hannah's gonna walk us through, and please know that there will be some additional things that you'll wanna pay attention to when we come back on August 7th.
Yeah, so, the one change that we had discussed that I don't think I should vote on was renaming this section. We should just call it the select board.
Where did we go from?
What
yeah.
was Article 4 is now Article 3.
We're on page 6. Yeah.
Again, this is all just cleanup, renumbering references to other articles based on all these changes. taking out his or her, replacing it with their. Section 5A was a change we approved based on, I believe, a recommendation from a former select board member.
A quick question, sorry. I wanna go to section 1B. The edit of each year, one select board member shall be elected for a term of 3, like, that staggering isn't put at risk with the start of each year?
No, it just seemed like it was confusing to not, I mean, it is in the sentence before that, but it felt like it needed some, that addition, but we don't have to stick to that.
No worries. Okay, yep.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed that. We don't need to stick to what?
The addition of
Yeah.
each year.
The word each year doesn't need to stay in there, but if it helps clarify, it's something to chew on.
Thought it was helpful to just explain that every year this is
Yeah.
this is who's getting reelected.
Got it. Thank you.
Can you tell me why 4C is highlighted?
Because that was the one that I explained, we talked a lot about and we made sort of verbal edits to it as we went. And I didn't bother at 12:30 in the morning the other night to actually go back and like figure out what that actually was. So I know we approved something there, but I haven't popped it in.
Yes, because that was the thing we went over and over.
Yes, we
Right.
did.
About not less and not more than.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that this was not the language that we approved.
No, because the language we approved was really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Really good.
It was so complicated to.
It is, and that's why I'm confused.
5D was part of our general commitment to take out these rubber stamping by town meeting. I know that we've talked about some other stuff with town attorney that I have actually looked into and can give answers to when we come back to that.
Great. Thank you.
E, again, is just taking out a reference to statute and just saying by law. F, we had voted to take this out. And so that's what we did. Because the list was not up to date and then it can be more evergreen if it's not in the chart. F, I believe, was also, the new F, I think, is just preserving some language that was in the beginning of the old F, and we had also discussed that as part of that change, to sort of reincorporate that.
Now, can I ask you a question on this new F? And I guess we'll know more about how we decide how human services and finance are appointed. So I'll hold my comment on the new F.
Yeah,
Until.
yeah, because if you look at the old F, the beginning, like, it just was, we should preserve that language that the select board appoints these people, we just don't want the list.
Yeah, no, I got you, yeah. Well, I'm just saying, appoints all members of committees, boards, and commissions, that might not necessarily be true, but those people will be elected if the select board isn't appointing human services and finance committee, that means we have decided that somebody else will. Do you know, do you see what I'm saying?
What we should say is, except as it may be,
Well, it says,
set forth
all-
differently someplace else in the
it
charter.
says all
Non-elected.
non-elected, and so if
So
these
anyone
guys
else
are
who
gonna
is
be-
All
elected falls
non-elected,
right
got
under
it.
different category.
Right,
Okay.
but it says all non-elected officers. Oh,
And members of committees, boards, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, I'm reading the and as a separate.
And that's
Okay.
why I changed it from offices to
Yeah.
positions later on to clarify it's not just officers, it's
Yeah,
everyone.
but actually, we don't need to wordsmith it right now, maybe it's something when we do the other drafting together, we can, so I think that sentence is gonna need to be changed,
Mhm.
but I'm not quibbling with the intent of it, I just think it's gonna need to be changed to nail it.
Right, because I'm thinking, I know what we're saying and I'm confused, but maybe it's because it's like quarter of
Right.
I think that's because it's 8:45.
nine. And I know what we need.
And then G, we had talked about that at length, and this just incorporates what we discussed. Section 6U is our taxation enabling language. I know we have discussed maybe cleaning up the rest of that list, but that was something that we had voted on and approved in 2024. 9U.
Oh, God, you skipped all that.
Where are we?
9U.
Wow.
Page 9,
Flying.
section U.
Yeah, that was a good language.
Yes,
That was
yes,
good.
yes.
Yeah, we approved that language.
And, and this is the, we're gonna be talking about
We
this next
haven't,
week.
we haven't gone.
Lots of
through
other
cleaning
changes
the
in
list.
this section.
August 7th,
Yeah.
August 7th is a good good.
In the town manager section, I don't think there's anything other than just the cleaning up the obsolete positions.
And we'll have more on that on August 7th.
Absolutely.
And then Article 6 gets removed in its entirety because there is no town school board. Article, what was 7 is now 5, we discussed cleaning that up, we did discuss removing the capital grant review board, so that's been taken out. Subsection C was solely about the school district, so that's been taken out.
You guys just want to get rid of all my jobs, don't you?
Well, as far as we know, the capital grant review board does not.
Hasn't met.
Yeah, I was on it once
Years
during
and
the.
years.
I've been on it 2 years.
Well, I mean, I volunteered for it because nobody else was, and I figured somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
have you met?
No, there's no reason to.
The last time I met was 2014 or earlier, and I think it was a lot earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
It was a lot earlier.
would be happy to conduct a meeting if it were necessary.
Yeah. And there's more changes to this section too.
Yeah, this again is just incorporating what we've already approved. So jumping ahead to the charter amendments article, what was 8 is now 6. Just one
That's
point,
13.
Thank you.
In a lot of places it said by resolution of the representative town meeting, and I thought it, with the switch, it might make more sense to say by resolution at the annual town meeting. Because the town meeting isn't really like this body anymore.
Right.
So as long as everyone's okay with that.
Yep.
I think that the reference to the article that creates the Charter Revision Commission probably needs to be updated. I didn't do that, but I will make a note to fix that. And then we discussed removing all of addendum A. And addendum B, I wasn't sure if we needed to save that, but if we do, I sort of cleaned that up to make it also apply to an open meeting.
Oh, that's good.
And then addendum C, we had voted to remove because it was also outdated and not up to date. And then I think we were on the fence about whether or not we should keep addendum B, but in the event we do, I took out all of the RTM and school district references. So that's what we've got so far.
Wow.
Great.
Tom.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In addendum B, section 1, voting, maybe I don't know exactly what division means. Isn't that how come that was struck? Is that not still potentially useful for open town meeting? Voting by division? It has been done at RTM, right? And isn't that just
Yeah.
everyone who's in one way stands until they're counted, and then everyone who's against it stands?
Yes.
Yeah, I
People
think
seem
that's
to
just
want that
How is
redundant
that not
language.
voting by standing?
Yeah. I think if you look in Robert's rules that, a division vote is a standing vote, so.
Yes. That's why.
Right.
Oh.
Since there's no voice votes.
Oh, okay.
So I also intend to go through and have a running clean copy.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that far yet, but because it would just be helpful to see this without all of this
read.
I know, it's so
And there was some weird formatting stuff in this document too, like you can see some stuff where things look a little funky, but we can clean that all up.
I actually just think it's exciting seeing it like this, because it feels like we did stuff,
Yeah.
and then there's more to come.
There may technically
This
be a
formatting always bothered me in the finance committee.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Step up to the microphone so it's on the record. I would really like to see there be a preamble in town charter. I'm a big fan of preambles. And I think that the structure of the charter should be rewritten entirely to follow more closely the structure of the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Vermont. In that, at least the Constitution of Vermont begins with a statement of rights, and then it goes on to the structure of the government. And I did see that the select board article is going to now be Article 1, so that at least partially takes care of that. But like I said, I wasn't really aware of the level of changes that were actually being considered here. And now that I see it, I think this really needs to be completely rewritten from scratch. So, I mean, at least the structure, the reorganization of the different chapters. I don't think it should follow the pacing that was originally set.
Right, yeah, and
Yeah, we agree with you on
we've
that.
talked about that, and again, this is just a first pat, like, this is the first time we've actually seen this full charter marked up like this. And I think once we sort of approve a lot of these sort of base decisions, then we can sort of sort it a little bit. But getting all the school board and the, because that's probably for the first 18 months that this committee met, every single person that came to talk to us was like, well, there's all these references to the school board. So it feels really good to get that part of it done.
But, I have to say that the thing that Dick DeGray said at the last select board meeting really got under my skin when he said that people have had 2 years in this process to participate in the Charter Review Commission. And if you didn't participate, between now and then, well, nuts to you. Well, sorry, Dick, but that's not how government works, okay? I have the right to show up at the last minute if I want to and make my voice heard. And I'm going to.
We appreciate it, and we agree with you on the rearranging, because I think it was one of the first things we all noticed was like, this isn't, the flow of it is weird.
Yeah.
So that's what the flow was in the 80s.
And making these changes is obviously this huge undertaking, and I don't think anyone's wanting to bother to take the time.
Right, by the time
to
they
really
were,
do.
by the time they were chucking the stuff in the boxes, they were so sick of it that they weren't thinking rearranging.
Can I ask you a question, Jim?
Sure.
If you look at the current preamble, the first, down to the history part,
Mhm.
is that what you'd like to keep, something like that?
No, I think that a preamble is really it's a statement of purpose for the document itself. The U.S. Constitution begins, "We the people in order to form a more perfect union." I mean, it's saying why are we making this document? The Constitution of Vermont does not have a preamble, famously.
The lettered articles talk about what the purpose of the charter is.
I mean, it does to some extent, but I mean, you were specifically referring to the histoy part of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really necessary.
She was saying everything before the history.
Everything before.
Oh, I missed that, sorry.
Like A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Yeah, those are the things that I have in mind. I wouldn't necessarily word it that way or keep the language that is there. But.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yes, Frank.
As with the thing with the school board, where there are a lot of things that are no longer relevant, are you not at all worried that if the RTM is preserved against your recommendation, that a lot of these other things that you have changed predicated on that change will become problematic? No, that's not a
The
problem.
way that we're structuring the proposed ballot, our changes would only be adopted in the event that the vote to discontinue RTM goes through.
And otherwise it would
And
say-
otherwise we would, likely go through the other process and present our proposed changes to RTM
Yeah.
in the spring.
So it'll be the two questions, and the second question about all these changes is only relevant if the first item passes and RTM is rescinded. If RTM is retained, then you're right, this proposed document won't, there'll be a lot of this that doesn't make sense, and so it'll have to be repackaged to have it reflect that RTM is still a thing.
So you're gonna have to.
And there'll be a vote some other time. I'm sorry?
It's not that mad of scramble because everything is on computer now, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had that same question, and I was a little confused as to why the two questions were being put together on the same ballot. Because I would have assumed that that the two questions really ought to be separate. But now I'm understanding that if RTM is retained, actually it's RTM that has to vote on the rest of the changes.
That's right.
Exactly. There's a method to the madness. in a way.
For the record, I am entirely against rescinding RTM. I have a lot more to say on that I will not say tonight, but
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback about when we were discussing the vote to rescind RTM that people wanted to know what it would be instead, which is another reason why we want to present the changes at the
Show all
same
the
time so
cards.
that people
Yeah.
know what would be there in its place.
That's right.
And then
Um,
we would have to re-edit.
Okay, so we all set looking at that. Thank you, Hannah. That's exciting. Do we want to move to talk about the election of the moderator and the Standing Charter Commission meeting to one of our next meetings, or do we want to? Okay. So that'll be on one of the next agendas, one of the 4 meetings. And now, moving forward, I'm just going to reiterate our plan. We're going to be meeting every Thursday in this room in the month of August at 6:15. And our plan is, the 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th. We also have a meeting on September 4th. We are going to be going to the Selectboard on September 9th with the final version. Final version of our recommendations, and the next agenda on August 7th will be, as we talked about, Human Services and Finance Committee, the Select Board related, and Town Manager related thing, and then we'll put Town Moderator and Standing Charter. Now, I'm assuming maybe we'll see where we are on the 7th, but maybe we do another pass through on the 14th.
Can I just ask, so is the town moderator question about the number of, about like getting a petition and,
Yeah,
because I think that that's also gonna come into our discussion of finance and human services.
yeah,
So maybe we just roll it in with
for that, yeah.
About
It's
getting signatures on the petition.
Yeah, that was a concern with the current town moderator. Like, right now, when you're an RTM member, if you've been one, all you gotta do is sign a form that goes, oh, you can be one. And the moderator is not like that. He continually has to go out and get 30 signatures.
Got it.
So it's kinda like, let's even out, let's.
So I think we can have sort of a broader discussion about elected positions and
Exactly.
Yes.
signatures.
Yes, yeah,
Totally.
that's how this came up.
Okay.
All right, so that'll be in without that discussion. And then Hannah, we can talk on the 7th, when we talk about our work plan moving forward, we can decide when we need to wanna do
Another
a
walk.
pass through, but it won't be the 7th because we'll have a whole chunk of things
There
for
are
select,
specific
right,
pieces.
that we can merge hopefully into the next walkthrough.
There might be a few of these that come back, but they'll only come back as specific pieces.
Right.
Things that we flagged tonight.
Yeah, right. And what I don't know who I was talking about with this, but I was going to see it was great that Bob was here tonight, but maybe pick whether it's August 21st to see if we get Hillary, if they can come, Hillary and Bob. Hillary's been updated, like I've been constantly updating Hillary, I know Hannah has too, like on what the changes are. But I don't know if we want her to come to a meeting, she can talk to all of us and the public to say like, okay, yeah, you guys have done this with the elections and stuff. So I was thinking about having her come.
I think that's really important, and I think that's the right meeting, because as we saw tonight, now that we're reducing it to writing, some of the things that seemed clear to us when we discussed them 2 years ago need a little more work right now, and so it feels like it's important that on the 21st, we get a full check-in with Bob and with Hillary to be able to flag anything else that we need to address on the 28th.
I have another question. We haven't met with our legislator.
I don't think that's necessary,
I
right?
agree.
You don't think so?
Yeah, when it gets time to send it their way, yes, but I don't think we need to be conferring with them about the content.
I don't mean now, but I mean, we should build that in at some point.
I don't think we could build that in until after the town votes, because that will dictate the next step.
Yeah, because there's nothing they can do for us until we know what is moving forward.
And it might not be us.
Right.
That, it is important for the town to coordinate with the legislators before it goes up to Montpelier, but that might not be us.
No, I'm just getting some curiosity from a couple people.
Well, they can see it.
Yeah. Well, and just like select board members and others have come in and given us their 2 cents worth, if any of the legislators have advice they want to offer to us, they should come and offer it to us.
All right, so maybe we can say, and again, we'll check, if I see if Bob and Hillary can come on the 21st, that's when we make sure, we definitely need to do at least another walkthrough on specific things with them at that meeting. You know what I mean? To have them see.
Yeah.
But I'll get with them, you can ask Bob and I can ask Hillary. And then we can have a regroup on the 7th to see where we are with that. Does that sound good? Okay. Great.
Rick Sprague, District 9 Rep. I believe this is the section where you wanted me to address the thing I was addressing before. I'd like to start out by saying I come at this with great appreciation for the long public service, not only on this committee, but many of you have put in over many, many years in many different roles. And I, despite implications to the contrary, I trust all of your intentions. That is particularly why I am mystified by why you would want to encourage the what I could only describe as chaos of trying to run us through what would end up probably being if you get your way, a couple of different scenarios over the next couple of years of town meetings or budget discernment, whatever the process ends up being. And it seems a lot less chaotic to be a little patient and to wait for times when people show up at the polls anyway. You would get a broader swath of the electorate showing up. You've been at it for a couple years already. It doesn't necessarily mean more meetings. It just means being a little more patient for the process to evolve. And I felt like the answer I got before was effectively because. And I would really like a more thoughtful, reasoned answer, and I don't need it right now. You guys all know how to reach me as I know how to reach you, and if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with me over coffee at Amy's or whatever, I would love that.
Why don't we let Peter take
Yeah,
our shot at it?
I want to say just one piece, and not a full answer to it. I think you've raised an clearly articulated concern, and I think there's food for thought there for us. And so, we've been on a course. We've been so certainly on that course that Kate has recently been to the select board.
Love to,
But you've raised the question of should we stay on that course? And that's fair, and so we should reflect on that. I just, the point I want to speak to is the potential for there to be a period of chaos, a transitional period where some things make less sense potentially to all of us, but we just have to live through it to get to the other side, is very real.
That's what
no
they've
matter
been saying in Washington.
No
and
matter-
I
No,
don't
listen
think
for one-
we
listen
have
for
to
one
follow
sec.
that
No,
example.
listen for one sec, because Peter's gonna make a point.
no matter when the vote occurs, you've raised a good point that we should consider about November versus March. But even if the vote happens in March, unless we change our minds about representative town meeting and we give dozens of hours to both receiving input and giving consideration to that. So with due respect to the fact that of course there are people who don't agree with where we've landed. We've landed thoughtfully. We haven't landed randomly in the place of thinking that we should go to open town meeting. And because of that two-step thing where first the voters have to decide whether or not to retain representative town meeting, and then only if representative town meeting is rescinded does the rest of it get considered. Because of that, there's the very real possibility that whenever that vote occurs, the rescinding of representative town meeting will kick us into following the statute for a year or two or more of an open town meeting occurring on a Tuesday and some other things happening in ways that are not what we think is best for Brattleboro, but are gonna be what we have to deal with in that interim period.
I wanna say one other, can I interject one other thing to even go further than Peter? If we have the vote on these charter changes on March 4th of next year, and on that night, the voters say, yeah, we wanna rescind town meeting, that happens like right then and there, which means the same night that RTM people are being elected, we may vote to rescind RTM, which means there is no RTM in 2026, and we have to do an open town meeting. So,
I think you're putting two things together that don't need to go together.
no, they have to, this is
Legally, they have to.
They have to.
If the vote is to rescind it, the vote could be to rescind it for the following cycle.
No, it
No.
can't be.
No.
This is the thing.
Really?
We've gone
Yeah.
through this because we thought this, and this is when we came to a big standstill at one of our meetings.
Yeah.
And we had to have Bob Fisher, we had this big thing. It's very, and Hannah's the lawyer here, because we had a big thing about this at one of our meetings. I mean, literally, we came to a giant standstill and we had this big thing. When we vote, the vote is, do you want to rescind representative town meeting? It happens right there. That has nothing to do with the charter. It doesn't have to go to Montpelier. We can't say rescind it next year. This is state statute. We're talking state statute. So that's why part of this is if we wait, and then who knows, we might end up waiting until March. But the thing is, if we wait until March, people could have gone out, gotten signatures to get their names on a petition to be a member of RTM. And at the same night they may be elected to RTM, this town may vote no RTM, which means we're doing an open
So
town
that's an
meeting.
argument for waiting until the following November.
So-
Anyway, yeah.
Just know, well, let's let Hannah talk.
Yeah, so, part of our discussion with Hillary is that this decision will impact what happens at the town meeting, and she needs time to understand how that would operate and understand, what the ballot would look like and everything else. And according to her, people just show up on that first Tuesday in November. They don't know if there's
Right.
she picked that day for us, saying this would be a good day to do this because people will just show up. And as you've heard tonight from people like Gemma, this is a really big piece of work that we're proposing, and I would suggest that it's really valuable to have it be voted on alone rather than along with a whole slate of other things, because it's a really important decision. And if we wait until March, then it gets arguably more complicated with the fact that we have to have this vote first before the charter changes, and with the timing with the state legislature, it just sort of delays everything. There's no guarantee even if we vote on it in March that they would approve it before the next March. And really they would have to approve it earlier than that so that ballots can be printed and everything else. And that's a big part of why we have come to this timing, is to minimize the impact on the town clerk especially, but everyone involved in this
So
process.
And our plan is when we bring this to the select board and ask them to, like, please, let's pass this on to the voters so they can decide. Our plan is to do a giant like
Info
public
sessions.
meetings, info sessions, like,
There's going to have to be.
yeah, and we've been thinking about that for a long time too. Like, what's the strategy gonna be? Because for us, we want every single person who wants to know about this to know about this. And so it gives us, so that's why, Frick, I take issue with the notion that we're not thinking this through, because we think this through really. I mean, if we come to an issue where we think, oh, we're not taking enough time, we stop. I mean, that meeting, when it all came to a head that, oh my God, we have to have something that says you have to rescind town meeting, because it happens right then. Because we had initially thought, oh, we could say this becomes, even for the governor, we thought we could tell him, this becomes effective the next in 2027, and we're told, no, it becomes effective on passage. Whatever charter we have, when the governor signs it, it's not up to us when it, you know what I mean? There's all this stuff that you don't realize until you're all of a sudden faced with, wait, we can't do it that way because state statute says so. So that's why I take issue when you said to us, why are you trying to ram this through? Why aren't you thinking? We have been incredibly thoughtful, sometimes to the annoyance of the people that sit in our audience who think we're taking too long making a decision. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that have come into my office going, why didn't you just vote on that last night? And I'm like, because we need to do it right. So I know you feel like we're doing it fast. We have some people who feel like, oh my God, you guys, will you stop going off on that word like for the last 5 years?
I think it's safe to say that the people who want this change made want it made yesterday.
Yeah. So there's all these varying things, but I just want to assure you, and that's why I sort of got like, what? That we are being thoughtful. I mean, the amount of thought that we have spent on this is just like.
I would still like to understand from each and every one of you at some point how you got to a point where you thought that changing from RTM to something else was a good idea.
You
And
had
that
so much,
has-
the 56 hours of meetings. That
Yeah,
we
well,
had.
and I also, as a relatively informed person, I had no idea that you were polling people on this subject.
Can I tell you something about that though? That survey was just, and we made this clear when we put the survey out, it was one thing of a whole host of, what was it, like a year and a half of hearing people at our meetings, coming in. So, and it's listening, and I said this, I think, at the select board meeting, that it wasn't just hearing people come in and say, I don't like town meeting, or represent town meeting, or I like it, or I don't. It was also other things in other sections of conversations that we had in other sections of the charter. And that made it really clear, at least to me, and I think to all of us, that people value being able to get in a room together and talk. And that's why, and you know what I mean, so that was really important to us. And so, I think there are lots of people that keep talking about the survey. We were really clear on March 31st when we said, hey, we have this survey, that's not the driving factor. That wasn't the number one factor. In fact, the survey, in a lot of ways, because we started a year earlier taking public comment on the form of annual town meeting, and even prior to that, when it just came up naturally, that was okay, one more step in this whole year of putting it on our agenda for 9 meetings worth of tell us what you think, and getting, what I mean? So there's been a lot of thing that went into it, and it wasn't just sitting and talking about, here's what people think about this. We did that. But all this other, as you see when you go through the charter, you realize, oh, that thing. And then we would hear from people like, hey, it's really important that the finance committee exists. And you're like, okay, we're hearing that they like that there's a committee that informs the people. That maybe is why it should be appointed by the people and not by the select board, because we're hearing from the people that they like the independence of the, you know what I mean? So there's this, I know I'm going on at this
I thought the
9:15, I think I'm
finance committee-
delusional.
The other thing
Is the
is,
finance committee appointed by us at RTM?
I shouldn't have gone down, I was just
And
using that as
as
an
is
example.
the Human
No,
Services
but
Committee?
the whole
You're
point,
missing
the
what I'm
whole
saying.
point is that even when and one of the things that people who are hung up on the survey are having trouble understanding is even in the comments, people wanted to talk.
Australian
wanted-
ballot people still wanna talk.
And so
At our
that's
forum.
why, and they wanna be able to change things.
Right,
So,
which is why town
but
meeting
you
is an
can't,
improvement over.
that's why we went to open town meeting. Because it allows for voters to get together and talk about the budget and to suggest changes to the select board if they want to.
And you know what?
And
And how's that different
But-
from RTM?
But Frick, let me
it,
tell you this.
because anybody can come,
Any registered voter.
any
Anytime.
registered voter can come.
And you're gonna be lucky because for the entire month of October, you're gonna hear us. And
And
it might drive you crazy.
I wasn't expecting an answer or a dialogue that would actually get to the gist of what the difference is, and I don't expect to do that at this hour tonight.
Right.
That's why I said maybe some other time.
Yeah, and you will hear it
Okay.
another time. If the select board adopts and if the select board puts our recommended changes on the ballot, there's gonna be, like, we will do what we can to leave no stone unturned, that the people of this community understand what our recommendations are. I mean, that's been a commitment we made probably 2 years ago when we started this whole thing. That we understand that we're just not making this isn't just 6 people deciding, that's what our charter is. That we wanna have a town charter, obviously, that gets approved by the town. Because it's the town citizens of this
Yeah.
community that live under the charter. And we've made that, and I don't think there's anybody who sat at this meeting, well, I shouldn't say that, I feel like we have done a really good job of listening and hearing, and I know there were some people going, you guys aren't hearing us, we actually did hear, and we did listen, and we heard everybody, and we listened to everybody. And I think if the select board puts our charter to the voters, that there's gonna be an entire, series of things that we do that will, I think, make it really clear. And that's why I urge people who are like fixated on one part of the charter or another, like, let us look at the charter in a big context of really like what it is. And that's why
I've been through this process before. And
I know you have, but I'm just urging people.
And what happened last time was that we were able to go through the proposals one by one and fine tune them. And, I believe we improved on the efforts.
But you understand why we have to do it the way we're doing it. If we're recommending.
I don't, but.
Well, we
yeah.
legally have.
Because you're recommending the change in RTM.
Yes.
You backed yourself into that corner,
Yeah, well,
absolutely, I understand that.
Why don't we let
But-
Gary talk, because he hasn't
Yeah.
got to say anything.
Okay, that sounds good.
But stay tuned, Frick, because it's not over yet. Gary, yes.
Hey, how are you guys? How you doing tonight? Hope you're nice and cool and whatnot. So I just want to ask a question. I mean, I don't want to be a Gary Downer, but this is
Gary, it's
something that-
9:20, don't be a downer.
I want to be a pretty much a realist and a logic in this situation now that the bill has passed from you know who. So in light of that, with all these cuts going across and the scrambling now to figure out where to get funding when it gets to Montpelier, if I'm not mistaken, this recommendation has to go to Montpelier. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct. The legislature has to pass it.
Right, so they're going to look at this recommendation and trying to figure out now how are they going to stay afloat with the cuts in SNAP, Medicaid, and all this other new stuff. What would your thoughts be if they cannot get to just recommend, because they're more worried about getting to now with these big cuts in federal funding, with a lot of things are gonna be cut, even with the human services and stuff like that, with all this funding.
Yep.
What
Well,
would your thoughts be on that? I just need you to put your thinking caps, just so you have to answer it right away, but just to think, what does it look like?
well, there's nothing,
We can't get to that.
we can't impact the legislature in any way. Even if there weren't cuts at the federal level and the legislature weren't dealing with anything, they have no obligation to take up our charter. But Hannah wants to say
And
something.
I think that that's one of the things that this two-step vote process has made us really have to examine is what happens in that interim period before the new charter gets approved. And the old charter will still be there. There may be provisions that become moot, but I mean, like there's all this school board stuff in there just doesn't apply anymore. Like we have really thought about not only how these proposed changes affect people, but how the process will affect people as well, because they're no matter what we do, I think that we will inevitably end up with a gap between the vote and the approval of the new charter.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because I was just thinking about that now that I'm seeing all the PBS, all these cuts going across. It's like, I'm sure Montrose is going to be scrambling to try to fill in those gaps to certain essential things that need to be sustained. So I just wanted to get your thoughts and feelings if they say, hey, we can't get to this. We're dealing with these issues right now. And how
We know that, Gary. The last charter change that went to the legislature for the 16-year-old vote, and I said this earlier, and I'll say it again, took, 2.5 years to get through? Something like that. So
that's why I'm glad you mentioned that about legislation, Maya. It's good to get a pulse to where they're at to see what's going on, what their thoughts are, so you have an idea. Like you said, you don't have to have them there because that doesn't delegate your decision. But just to have that idea, have that pulse to see where you're.
Our legislators have told us that they're very supportive of what we're doing, but there's really no need for us to discuss with them what's happening until the town has approved something and they know what is being sent up to the state.
Right, you have a good draft. Perfect, great, thank you guys.
Thanks, Gary.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, come back on August 7th.